that no individual, no group should be targeted simply because they are a political opponent or because the President of the United States has some personal animosity toward them. You've just said that President Trump is the most transparent president in history, tragically and chillingly. You may be right when it comes to criminal justice, because far from ending weaponization of justice, I would submit, Madam Attorney General, that President Trump has embodied it. And we have a record. It is a public record of his express instructions that certain individuals be investigated. The Attorney General of New York, Tish James, my colleague Adam Schiff, the former CISA director, Chris Krebs, the DHS former Chief of Staff, Miles Taylor. There's a list. And he has been transparent. In fact, 5 days before the indictment of James Comey, he put this post up as instructions to you. He didn't mince words. He was very open and public that you should indict James Comey and others because they are guilty as hell. No more delay now. 5 days before you indicted, or grand jury at your instructions indicted James Comey. I'd like to know from you what conversations you've had with President Trump about the indictment of James Comey.
Senator, I am not going to discuss any conversations I have or have not had with the President of the United
Did you
States.
see that
You're
post?
an attorney, you have a law degree, and you know that I'm not going to do that. I also find it fascinating, because I'll keep fighting to ensure that law enforcement and the judicial process move forward without political interference. No one is above the law, not even the president. That's a quote from you, Senator Blumenthal, in 2017.
Well, let me ask you then, when you saw that
No
post,
one is above the law. That was your quote.
When you saw that post, did you talk to anybody in the White House?
I am not going to discuss any conversations I have, nor any investigations,
So
nor
you were unwilling to
any
tell
pending
this committee
cases.
about conversations with the White House
And if I may
regarding James
continue,
Comey's indictment.
and if I may
Let me
continue,
show you a picture.
James Comey was indicted by one of the most liberal grand juries in the United States.
The night before James Comey's indictment, you had dinner with the President of the United States. Pretty intimate group.
Actually, there were a lot of people there that night. That's a great
James
picture.
Comey discussed at that dinner?
I love that picture. That's a great picture. And there were a lot of people there that night. I think the
Well,
entire cabinet was there.
Did you discuss James Comey with the President of the United States? He was sitting just to your left.
Well, 2 seats down, yes, 2 seats down. And I am not going to discuss any
I'm going to take
conversations
that
I've
as
had
a
or
yes,
not have with the
because
President
the
of the
American
United
public
States.
is entitled to know, Madam Attorney General,
The entire
whether
cabinet was
you
at that dinner,
took
too,
instructions from President Trump after he told you very directly to indict James Comey, which is weaponization of the Department of Justice.
Oh,
You
wait,
know,
wait, wait.
I want to agree with my colleague, Senator Hawley, that weaponization of our justice system must end. That's the reason that I proposed legislation, and I challenge him and my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to join me in legislation that would create a statutory right of action for people who are selectively or maliciously prosecuted for political reasons. It would codify your manual, the Department of Justice manual, on political prohibitions against political considerations in charging decisions, and prohibit the White House from intervening, President Trump and any other president from intervening in charging decisions. It would make reforms to the grand jury process. You've just said this grand jury was liberal. We should reform the grand jury process to ensure that the government is not abusing its power and authority, and it will require transparency and accountability reforms at DOJ so that you will and other attorneys general be held accountable for these kinds of decisions. Will you join me in supporting that kind of reform?
Senator Blumenthal, I find it so interesting that you didn't bring any of this up during President Biden's administration when he was doing everything to protect Hunter Biden, his son. And I think you just saw what Director Radcliffe just released.
You know, this is an effort to be positive.
If I can finish
and
answering the question, I'm not
Madam
going to
Attorney
yell
General.
over you. I'm not going to get in the gutter with you. But information that the Biden administration told them not to investigate Hunter Biden's involvement with Ukraine. I'm not going to be lectured to you about integrity by someone who lied about being in the military just to be elected a senator.
The merger between Hewlett-Packard Enterprises and Juniper Network was settled. You authorized the settlement. It was the subject of a lawsuit to block it. The settlement produced virtually no concessions from Hewlett-Packard. It was a settlement that prompted criticism from the Antitrust Division. Did you authorize that settlement yourself?
As I stated earlier, Gail Slater is doing an incredible job running the antitrust unit. And as I stated earlier, that is still a pending matter. As you should know with a law degree, that all mergers, if I can finish answering the question.
I'm going to,
if I could finish, no, I'm answering the question.
Because my time is limited.
No, well then don't ask me a question. So,
let me just ask you,
as I said, you have a law degree. You know that not only are mergers agreed upon, but they have to go to a court of law to be approved. It's a multi-step process. And as I said earlier, that is still pending. And I have full faith in Gail Slater.
And Ms. Slater reportedly objected to the settlement.
Reportedly.
And moreover, two of her top officials were fired, Roger Alford and Bill Sinner. Did you authorize and direct those firings after they objected to the settlement?
I am not going to discuss personnel matters or pending litigation in my office.
Let me ask you about another merger. The merger involving two home health care agencies on favorable terms, likely to drive up costs for millions of Americans. The Transportation Department's rule to provide compensation to travelers impacted by airline-caused flight delays, which was canceled. The merger of Skydance and Paramount, after Paramount's ownership took a number of steps favorable to the president. These kinds of mergers belie the claims that President Trump himself has made, that this administration will stop big corporate mergers that ultimately benefit the owners of those corporations rather than consumers or ordinary everyday Americans.
Senator,
let me ask you about
you just listed, you just gave a list of many mergers.
I have a question
Can you talk to me about the issue with these mergers?
I do have a question. In the merger that took place,
which merger? You've listed many.
Involving American Express GBT. I understand that Brian Ballard, longtime backer and head of the law firm where you worked, was instrumental in lobbying the Justice Department to drop that lawsuit. It was dismissed, so it's not subject to a court review. What conversations did you have with Mr. Ballard?
Senator Blumenthal, I cannot believe that you would accuse me of impropriety when you lied about your military service.
I am
you
not
lied.
asking
You
you-
admitted you
I am
lied
not
to be
accusing you
elected
of
a U.S. senator.
impropriety.
You
I'm asking
lied.
you
How
about
dare you? I'm a
conversations
career prosecutor.
with Mr.
Don't you
Ballard.
ever challenge my integrity.
had
I have
apparently-
abided by every ethics standard. Do not question my ability to be fair and impartial as Attorney General, and anything
You'll
with
answer that
my
question to
former
another of my
firm,
colleagues.
Ballard Partners.
Thank you.
Senator Lee has asked for the chair.
Yeah, just wanted to note for the record, the Paramount merger that he referenced was not within the Department of Justice's ambit. That was at the FCC, not the Department of Justice. Attorney General Bondi would have had nothing to do with that. Thanks.
And that was why I asked Senator Lee. He didn't know that. He was reading off a script.
Before I call on Senator Kennedy, it's kind of laughable about my Democrats friends expressing fear and concern at the Justice Department's recent attempts at holding parties responsible for their actions. I can only ask, where have they been in the last few years? They had no problem watching the Biden administration and its White House use all of its might and power to attack Trump and associates. And now even Republican senators have been selected to have their telephone records made public, or not public, but well, I guess they're public now. But Biden weaponized our institutions and didn't hear a peep from the other side. Now every investigation and prosecution under this administration, people are going to be held accountable for their actions. Senator Kennedy, or
I want extra time, Mr. Chairman.
okay.
I mean, this is, enough is
Well,
enough.
Cruz was next, but he wasn't here.
Senator Cruz was next.
Okay, Senator Cruz, if you're ready, go ahead.
Well, thank you, but I will welcome Senator Kennedy providing color commentary throughout my question.
I will be happy to. If we ever finish this hearing this year.
And I'll point out Senator Kennedy has a new book about testing negative for stupid, so I hope I test negative for stupid. I hope I meet the threshold of
You
your
do
book
meet
title.
it, and I talk in the book about the tattoo of the Backstreet Boys on your back.
Look, I can't help that you don't want to reach young people. I think young people are the future, damn it, and I'll do whatever steps are
The
needed.
Backstreet Boys?
That would be on Vice President Vance's playlist, I heard, that got hacked.
General Bondi, welcome. I apologize for injecting you in the middle of Senator Kennedy's antics. We can't help him. Thank you for the job you're doing. You are doing a tremendous job keeping this country safe. And our families are safer because you were on that wall. Our families are safer because you are returning the Department of Justice to its core function, which is enforcing the law and locking up bad guys. We saw for 4 years, under the Biden administration, we saw the Department of Justice politicized and weaponized, and we saw them refuse to do their core function. More than 12 million illegal aliens flooded into this country, and the Biden Justice Department seemed to think its job was letting murderers and gangbangers and rapists go. And the results in just a few months that you've been able to produce are tremendous. Arrests of violent criminals are up 125% since the Biden administration. Fentanyl trafficking prosecutions have risen 42% since fiscal year 2023. DOJ has coordinated with DHS to remove over 220,000 criminal illegal aliens this year alone. Under your leadership as Attorney General, you have helped rescue 4,000 children from predators and helped arrest 1,300 child predators and 285 human traffickers. In my home state of Texas, Operation Soteria Shield resulted in the rescue of 109 children. Thank you, Attorney General Bondi. Texans are safer because you are serving. Americans are safer because you are serving. You have a big task, cleaning up the messes of the Biden DOJ. One of the most egregious failures of the Biden Justice Department was its refusal to protect judges and Supreme Court justices. As you know, in May of 2022, an unknown individual leaked to Politico the draft of the Supreme Court's decision in Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization, the opinion that finally overturned Roe versus Wade. That leak was a crime. It was a theft of government property under 18 U.S.C. Section 641, and it was an unauthorized disclosure of confidential information under 18 U.S.C. Section 1905. General Bondi, do you agree that leaking that opinion was a criminal act?
Senator, I can't discuss anything regarding that matter. That should answer your question.
Well, I will say this. The leak occurred in 2022. So the 5-year statute of limitations has not expired. And I'm going to ask you, if it is not happening already, to direct the FBI to investigate and find the leaker. The leaker has not been exposed, the leaker has not been identified, and the FBI has far greater investigatory tools at its disposal than does the Marshal Service. And when it comes to defending the rule of law, when it comes to the integrity of our court system, having partisan law clerks, and I believe in all likelihood it is a law clerk who leaked it, leaking opinions designed to try to pressure the court politically is a gross subversion of the integrity of the court. And so I would ask you as Attorney General to direct the FBI to use every resource possible to investigate, to find the leaker, and when you identify the leaker, to prosecute the leaker for that criminal conduct.
Thank you, Senator Cruz.
All right, I want to turn, secondly, after that decision was leaked. I believe the leak was part of a broader effort to intimidate and to threaten and harass justices into trying to get them to change their decision. And we saw mobs assemble outside the homes of multiple justices. Do you agree, General, that the mobs that came outside the homes of justices were there to intimidate the court and to try to influence the justice's decision?
100%.
Well, as you know, federal law, in particular 18 U.S.C. Section 1507, makes it a crime to picket or parade outside a judge's home, quote, with the intent of influencing that judge's decision. That statute is crystal clear. And I will point out, these protests happened in 2022. So just like the leak, the 5-year statute of limitations has not expired on these protests. But unfortunately, the Biden Department of Justice didn't give a damn about prosecuting this statute because President Biden and Merrick Garland and the political hacks at DOJ disagreed with the Supreme Court's decision in Dobbs and were perfectly fine turning a blind eye to violent protesters threatening the justices and their children. You may recall I questioned Attorney General Garland about this statute, and he admitted under oath that not a single protester had been prosecuted. And he blamed the Marshal Service. He said the problem was the Marshals, quote, didn't make arrests. Well, subsequent documents told a different story. Internal training materials obtained reveals that the Marshals were explicitly instructed not to arrest protesters under Section 1507. So the reason there was no arrest is because a political decision was made that we like what the protesters are protesting for, and we, the Department of Justice, are not going to protect the safety of justices. We're going to allow them to be victims of an intimidation and threatening campaign. Just as I asked you with regard to the Dobbs opinion, I would ask you to direct the FBI to review the footage of these protests, to review the evidence that exists in terms of who engaged in it, and will you commit that anyone who you can prove violated 18 U.S.C. Section 1507 will face consequences and face prosecution?
Senator, we currently have 63 ongoing investigations involving judges and officials throughout this country. That scene that you're showing will not happen under my watch. It will not happen under Donald Trump's presidency. It doesn't matter if you're a liberal judge or a conservative judge or justice. That will not happen.
Amen. And that point that General Bondi made is very important. I would be equally outraged if you had nuts in front of the liberal justices. I'd say arrest them and throw them in jail. Violence is unacceptable, regardless of whether I agree or disagree with your politics. And violence, particularly fueled by rhetoric by irresponsible politicians, violence can result. And tragically, it resulted in one deranged individual traveling from California to Maryland with the intention of murdering Justice Brett Kavanaugh. As you know well, this deranged individual was arrested outside the justice's house. He was arrested with a kill kit. He was arrested with a gun, with handcuffs, with duct tape, with zip ties, and with the intention of murdering Justice Kavanaugh, very possibly murdering Justice Kavanaugh's wife and two daughters, and potentially murdering two other Supreme Court justices.
Senator Ronald.
As you know, just this week, a left-wing Biden-appointed judge sentenced this attempted murderer, this attempted assassin, to just 8 years. The Department of Justice asked for 30 years.
That's right.
And that judge downward departed by 22 years. Why? Because this left-wing judge said that the attempted murderer was transgender. And because he identifies as transgender, apparently it's okay to try to kill a Supreme Court justice if your politics are sufficiently woke. Now, I know you have said the Department of Justice is going to appeal, and you absolutely should. I called this week, I believe this judge should be impeached because the judge has demonstrated she is completely unfit to be a federal judge. And what is your view of the justice of this sentence of just 8 years for the attempted murder of a Supreme Court justice?
I was speaking with our prosecutor, Ms. Mal, who did an incredible job on this case. She did an incredible job. And yet, this judge gave 8 years. And the judge also would not refer to the defendant by his biological name, referred to him by the pronouns, and was concerned about the treatment that this individual would get regarding a sex change while in prison. And we are appealing that sentence. I immediately said we are appealing that sentence.
Thank you.
But my prosecutors did an incredible job on that case.
And the judge wanted to put him in a women's prison.
Before Senator.
Not going to happen, excuse me, I'm sorry, Chairman. That's not going to happen in the Bureau of Prisons now.
Before Senator Ronald, without objection, I'd like to introduce 3 FBI 1023 forms into the record. The first 1023 form I made public last Congress. This is the one that Director Patel said his predecessors did fully investigate. The second and third 1023 forms relate to the first in that they reference potential Biden family criminal conduct. Senator Johnson and I made these 2 public, and we simply want to know whether the government has investigated what it found, and if not, why not? Senator Ronald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Bondi, FISA Section 702 will expire in 6 months. In response to my questions for the record, at your confirmation hearing, you said you did not have experience with FISA, but if confirmed, you would consult with experts at DOJ. Now, you've had that opportunity. Do you support adding additional safeguards for searching Americans' communications in the 702 database?
Senator, Section 702 is a vital source of foreign intelligence and instrumental in keeping Americans safe. We also take individuals' rights of their individual rights of all Americans very seriously. And many statutory reforms to FISA have incorporate safeguards. They have to incorporate safeguards to protect our civil liberties. The Department of Justice looks forward to working with you to discuss anything regarding 702.
Appreciate
I believe
that.
my staff, and Senator, I also want to thank you for this hearing. Your staff met with my staff, and I greatly appreciate that.
Thank you. We're going to be working on 702, so I appreciate the openness to further amending 702. At your confirmation hearing, you assured me that it is the Department of Justice's decision to determine what cases will be prosecuted. Last month, the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia was forced out. President Trump then posted the message behind me asking about prosecuting James Comey. You then appointed a new U.S. attorney who within days secured an indictment against James Comey. That social media post behind me saying, "What about Comey?" was directed to Pam. Are you the Pam that the president was referring to?
I'm sure I was.
So it's very clear to me that when the president posts something like that, that he considers the DOJ to be his law firm and you his lawyer. And in fact, very shortly after the post to you, Comey gets indicted. Last year, President Trump's new border czar, now border czar, Tom Homan, was videotaped taking a bag with $50,000 in cash from undercover FBI agents after suggesting he could help with government contracts. Sounds like a bribe. 2 weeks ago, DOJ officials reportedly shut down the bribery investigation into Mr. Homan. Ms. Bondi, did you approve closing the Homan investigation, bribery investigation?
Senator Hirono, as I stated earlier, the Department of Justice and the FBI conducted a thorough review, and they found no credible evidence of any wrongdoing. You were also on video outside the White House protesting with a group called CASA, where Antifa members were. Does that mean you're a member of Antifa?
You know, I simply asked the question as to whether or not you approve the shutting down of the investigation, Mr. Homan. I have to assume that you did because the FBI it reports to you. But the American people would look at the situation where this person is taking a $50,000 in cash, no less, and you testified today that a thorough investigation was done. Now, I have to assume, I conclude, that since no wrongdoing was determined, that in answer to Senator Whitehouse's question, he kept the money. He kept the money, and I hope that he put that on his tax returns as income. Next question. Over 1,200 rioters were convicted of charges related to January 6th. President Trump has since pardoned nearly all of them. As if that weren't enough, last month there were reports that a lawyer for the January 6th rioters met with senior DOJ officials about setting up a compensation fund like the one that Congress set up after 9/11 to compensate these rioters. Ms. Bondi, is anyone at DOJ considering setting up a compensation fund for January 6th rioters? Yes or no?
Senator, I have had no meetings or discussions about a fund.
So would you support such a fund? Would you okay such a fund?
Senator, you can send me the information on the fund, and I'd be happy to look at it.
No, but do you think that's a good idea to, this is what I'm getting at. Because to actually set up a fund and to have people talking with your senior people at DOJ, political people, about creating a fund, you won't let us know what you think about that. That's pretty unbelievable. On January 30th of this year, the Trump DOJ's Antitrust Division sued to block the merger of two tech companies. Then, well-connected lobbyists met with your political deputies who overruled the career staff and approve the merger. So there's a settlement on that. And separately, DOJ sued Ticketmaster last year for monopolizing concert tickets and forcing consumers to pay outrageous fees. Ticketmaster has hired the exact same lobbyists who met with senior DOJ political people regarding the merger of the two tech companies. So my question is, Ms. Bondi, have lobbyists met with your political deputies about the Ticketmaster case?
Senator Hirono, as I stated earlier, I am not going to discuss anything that is ongoing. Gail Slater runs the Antitrust
I would
office,
say
and
that-
Gail
that-
Slater, if I can finish, Gail Slater is doing an incredible job running my antitrust unit.
It's highly likely, Ms. Bondi, that the same lobbyists who met with your people basically got rid of the antitrust case.
Senator, I don't think a lot of people
I
like
would
that
say
you were
that
out
they're probably
protesting with
meeting you
Antifa.
right now. Next question. You have fired dozens of career prosecutors because they worked on cases involving President Trump or January 6 rioters. For example, one career federal prosecutor who secured over 100 convictions in Florida. He also spent time in D.C. prosecuting January 6 cases. He received an outstanding review only 2 days before you signed a memo firing him. The memo cited no reason for his firing. Are you firing career prosecutors solely because they worked on cases like January 6th that the president doesn't like?
Senator Hirono, I am not going
Yes
to
or
talk
no?
about personnel matters with you.
Well, we all know that hundreds of career prosecutors have left the DOJ, and literally hundreds, we're told. And
Yeah,
you know,
Senator,
you've
are you
lost. The
familiar with the one
DOJ
that threw a
has
sandwich
lost-
at an ICE officer? Are you a Homeland Security
Here
officer?
is the
Are you familiar
reason.
with the one who went out on her lunch break and was
Ms. Bondi,
making obscene gestures?
Would you say that DOJ losing these career prosecutors and the thousands of hours of experience they have prosecuting criminals, that is not a reassuring situation?
Senator, many employees took the fork in the road and resigned. DOJ is hiring committed prosecutors who will actually come into the office and work and not work remotely
I
and
think we all
prosecute
know that
violent criminals around the country and terrorists. And
When
I
you-
am very proud
you
of the
fire
work all of our prosecutors
I'm running out
are
of
doing.
time, so I think you should stop with your continuous interruptions, in my opinion. Mr. Chairman, I just want to close by saying that what was once the Department of Justice has become the Department of Revenge and Corruption. Rather than pursuing cases without fear or favor, this DOJ seeks to favor the president's friends and instill fear in his alleged enemies. If you're a friend of the president, this corrupt DOJ will bend over backwards to help you, just like it dropped the bribery investigation of Tom Homan, like it's considering paying money to January 6 rioters, and like it has put antitrust enforcement decisions in the hands of well-connected lobbyists. But if you're on the wrong side of this president, you will face the wrath of DOJ, no matter what the facts, law, or justice support. James Comey is indicted days after the president's social media directive. Experienced career prosecutors are fired just because they were assigned to work on January 6 cases. Blue states are sued to get highly sensitive private voter data, whereas red states are left alone. The double standard is clear, and the American people are waking up to the corruption and favoritism and the lawlessness at the DOJ. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
May I respond, Chairman?
Yes.
May I respond?
Yes, you may respond. Then Senator Kennedy.
Thank you. The double standard is crystal clear, Senator Hirono, crystal clear, because you didn't complain for 4 years when President Trump was being targeted by Jack Smith, by the last Justice Department. But the American people spoke loud and clear when they overwhelmingly elected him. The two-tier system of justice is over.
Senator Kennedy. Yes.
General, welcome. Let's suppose that I'm appointed special counsel at the Department of Justice. And I go to the telecommunication companies, the phone companies. Let's single out AT&T, and I say, look, I know you're busy, but I want to see a copy of the phone records of a sitting United States senator. They're not going to just give them to me, are they?
No, Senator, of course not.
In fact, they're probably going to ask me what planet I just parachuted in from, aren't they?
Yes, Senator.
They're going to tell me to come back with a subpoena, aren't they?
Yes, Senator.
Okay. What do I have to show in that subpoena to get those phone records of a sitting? Did I mention it was a sitting United States senator? I can't remember. What do I have to show to get the phone records of a sitting United States senator?
Yes, Senator, there were actually 8 sitting United States
Yeah, I
senator,
heard that.
and you would have to have cause.
I'm sorry, what do I have to show?
You would have to have cause to get the
Good cause or
subpoena.
probable cause?
Probable cause.
Okay. Probable cause, or if it's a subpoena duces tecum, good cause, to show what?
You would need good cause for a subpoena duces tecum, and what you would have to show is that you believed a crime had been committed, or there was a possibility of a crime, or that could lead to other crimes. We
By the
frequently, in criminal enterprises, subpoena cell
By the
phones.
sitting United States senator?
Senator, they would have to have believed you were part of a criminal conspiracy, is my understanding.
Would a judge have to sign off on it? On the subpoena?
Yes, Senator. Well, for a subpoena duces tecum, Jack Smith probably took it straight to the judge.
Now, the phone companies, particularly their general counsel, if they're worried about civil liability, even with a subpoena to get the phone records of a sitting United States senator. Did I mention it was a sitting United States senator?
Yes, Senator.
The general counsel for that phone company, let's say AT&T, they have the right to seek to quash that subpoena, don't they?
Phone companies frequently do that.
Yeah. And a smart general counsel for that phone company is going to call the sitting United States senator and say, would you like to weigh in on this? Would you like me to quash the subpoena? We're talking about invading someone's privacy here by a sitting United States senator. Could the general counsel for the phone company do that?
Well, Senator, if they believe that a crime could have been committed, they could not tip off the person who committed the crime. Again, I can't comment on details of this
Yeah, I'm
particular
not asking,
case.
I'm just asking you theoretically.
I've never seen you commit a crime, Senator
But
Kennedy.
let's suppose, okay, they didn't want to tip off the sitting United States senator. But the phone company and the general counsel for the phone company, or companies, if there were more than one involved, could say, you know, this is serious as an aneurysm. This is serious as 4 heart attacks and a stroke. This is a sitting United States senator. So general counsel would likely advise the CEO, well, you need to file a motion to quash. The telephone companies could have contested those subpoenas, could they not?
Hypothetically, yes, I can't talk about the facts of this
Understand?
particular
We're
case.
talking hypothetical.
Senator, subpoenas are issued all the time through phone companies working with the general counsel.
But they can
for
file a motion to
cause.
quash.
They could, yes,
Yeah.
in any case.
And if they should have filed a motion to quash, and a reasonable person would have filed a motion to quash, because this is a sitting United States senator, and they didn't file a motion to quash, they would incur civil liability, wouldn't they?
Senator, typically phone companies follow a subpoena from a United
I
States
know they do, but
attorney.
they don't have to.
They could challenge it, Senator.
Yeah. And if they don't challenge it, they better have a damn good reason. Right? Right?
Senator, I can't talk about the facts of this particular
This is just a
case.
hypothetical.
In general, hypothetically, Senator, maybe they didn't recognize any of the names of the 8 sitting United States senators.
Uh-huh, hypothetically.
That was a joke.
Or maybe they should have gone to Amazon and buy some testicles online. Instead of just saying, sure, I'll just show you the phone records of a sitting United States senator on the basis of an administrative subpoena. Now, do you have copies of the subpoena applications for
Yes,
these
Senator,
8
Senator, I can't discuss anything regarding
You
this
can't
case
even
with
tell me if you have copies?
I can't discuss any of this.
All right,
with
when are
I'm
you
sorry.
going to, General, when are you going to be able to discuss it?
I can't discuss whether there is or is not a pending investigation,
I understand,
Senator. This
but
was
let's
just
assume
brought to light
if
by
there is a
Director
pending
Patel.
investigation, I don't want this to get swept under the rug, okay? Because I think you're going to get pushback from all quarters. I think the telecommunication companies are going to be all over you like a bad rash because they've got liability here for just turning over these records when they knew what was going on. I think some FBI agents may have some liability here. I think a special counsel might have some liability here. If I were your special counsel and you had appointed me and I wanted to get the records of a sitting United States senator, is that something you would expect me to tell you as Attorney General of the United States?
They better have.
Yeah.
And
Do we know in this instance of the 8 sitting United States senators if they told Attorney General Garland?
Senator, I just learned about this very recently, as did Director Patel, and we cannot discuss the details. I don't know many of the details.
Well, maybe we ought to get Attorney General Garland here. Do you know if the special counsel told FBI Director Wray? Is that something, let me put it another way. If I were your special counsel and you were the director of the FBI and I'm trying to get the phone records of a sitting United States senator, did I mention it was a sitting United States senator? Is that something
couple times.
that you would expect me to tell you as director of the FBI?
In general, I would believe the FBI would help execute the subpoenas
Yeah.
to the
Okay,
businesses.
I want to switch to another subject in the 12 minutes that I have left, since everybody else got to go over. I've got to ask you about this, General. Secretary Howard Lutnick on October 1 gave an interview to the New York Post about Mr. Epstein. And he described Mr. Epstein as, quote, the greatest blackmailer ever, close quote. Have you reviewed that transcript of that interview?
I have not reviewed the transcript, but I saw the clip of it.
Okay. It appears that Secretary Lutnick was Mr. Epstein's next door neighbor. In fact, their townhomes shared a wall. And the reporter that was talking to Mr. Lutnick, she asked how other prominent men could have been associated with Epstein when Mr. Lutnick could immediately sense that he was a, quote, pervert. And then Secretary Lutnick said, or rather the reporter said, did they see it and ignore it? Do you remember that from the interview?
I do.
And Commerce Secretary Lutnick said, no, they participated. And then Commerce Secretary Lutnick goes on to say, quote, that's what his MO was. You know, get a massage, get a massage. And what happened in that massage room, I assume, was a video. This guy was the greatest blackmailer ever, blackmailed people. That's how he had money, end quote. Is that true?
Senator, as our July memo said, we did not uncover evidence. This case has gone through 3 administrations, as well as former U.S. Attorney Alex Acosta.
I know that, Pam, but have you interviewed Secretary Lutnick?
No, Senator.
Do you plan to?
If he wants to talk to the FBI or the FBI wants to talk to him, that is more than on.
Don't you think you ought to talk to him after this interview?
Senator, if Howard Lutnick wants to speak to the FBI and if Director Patel wants to speak to Howard Lutnick, absolutely.
Okay. Maybe we ought to get Mr. Lutnick in here too, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Booker.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Attorney General, I know there's been a lot of talk about grants. I hate to bring you through this again, but it's really important to my state. New Jersey is one of the top 4 donor states in America, which means our taxpayers, Americans, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, millions of people send more money down here than we get back in relative to all the other states in the nation except for 3 others. We've been talking a lot about different grants. I want to be very specific about Office of Justice Program grants. There were $35 million worth of grants that were approved in a bipartisan way in this committee, grants that invest in things that are really vital to the public safety of our community. I know, again, we are in a room full of people who want to see crime go down. Republicans and Democrats, law enforcement officers have spoken to the urgency of these programs which deal with school violence, which divert people into substance abuse and treatment, and supportive services. Community violence intervention programs, again, bipartisan programs that this committee really worked hard on this. I've heard what you've said to others on the committee. I heard what you said to Patty Murray in an appropriations committee, that members should reach out to you if they want those grants reinstated. I've written letters, but I am hoping that you and I can have a conversation. $35 million of frozen funding for public safety that the people of New Jersey, Democrats, Republicans, and Independents, really invested in those resources, those programs, and those nonprofits who were expecting those grants, often made outlays and are now really in a lurch. Can we talk about those grants and the restoration of them, please?
Yeah, and Senator Booker, I had stated earlier that yes, we did terminate grants. We have an appeal process. We have turned some back on. We are appealing. We are looking at some. Some we have denied. Some are still pending. I believe we have multiple appeals pending with New Jersey, and I would be happy to sit down with you and look at those appeals. I believe one is with the city of New Jersey. I know there are multiple ones pending, but of course, I'd be happy to sit down with you or any senator or any House member and look at grants that have been terminated. I've been doing that, and I would welcome that.
But I will be the first one you sit down with, correct?
Absolutely. I'd love to sit down with you on that. I'll look at those tomorrow, Senator Booker.
Thank you very much. I want to move
But
on.
I'm sorry, we have been restoring some grants.
I understand,
some
but-
have been denied, some have not.
New Jersey, none have, and I really want to get to the bottom of that, and hoping that we can reinstate some of those grants. The second thing I want to move on to is that earlier this year, the Department of Justice charged Newark Mayor Ras Baraka after he sought access to Delaney Hall Detention Center to conduct oversight. The charges on their face, to many of us, especially in New Jersey, were clearly baseless. Many people say they're politically motivated. And then the judge, the federal judge, admonished the prosecutors for even bringing the case. This is the quote from the federal judge. Federal prosecutors serve a single paramount client, justice itself. Your role is not to secure convictions at all costs, nor to satisfy public clamor, nor to advance political agendas. The federal judge went on to call the charges embarrassing and a worrisome misstep. Mayor Baraka was arrested that day on the scene, and I know you understand this, to arrest a mayor of a major city on charges that were called by a federal judge embarrassing and a worrisome misstep is very concerning to me, and I think should be to the whole committee. A recently released video shows a federal agent telling fellow officers that the decision to arrest Baraka was, quote, per the Deputy Attorney General of the United States, and I'm assuming that person is Todd Blanche. this is evidence to me that this decision wasn't made by people on the ground in the field, but by Maine justice, that they were directing an arrest from DC on the scene. And it leads to the conclusion that this was a political decision, that the decision to arrest was not made by the people who were there on the spot. And I can assume that you can see how that's problematic to me. So I have questions not about the case, but really about how the decisions to arrest and charge Braca and now MacIver, Congresswoman MacIver, were really made. Before this committee, I am saying that I'm going to submit these questions for the record, and I'm really hoping that we can understand how those decisions, as our oversight, how we're making decisions, especially for high-level officials in my state, the mayor of our largest city, the congressperson of that city, and I'm hoping that you could respond to those letters on the record.
Yeah, and Senator, that matter is ongoing, and so I can't discuss it. As an attorney, you realize I can't discuss an ongoing matter.
And I respect that. I guess I just want to know, and we'll leave this for the questions for the record about the decisions on how they're being made, not the case in itself. I want to move on. And again, I've heard your testimony so far. I know that there is data about violent crime in this city, but I'm really concerned about the application of Justice Department resources towards the challenges we have. You and I both know that about 11,000 Americans have been killed by a firearm just this year. The Department of Justice, according to the White House's own documents, as well as that of the conservative think tank Cato, have shown that there has been a significant movement of law enforcement resources away from many other issues and into immigration enforcement. And we are seeing that in that immigration report, a lot of the people are not the violent criminals that we are really needing to rid our streets of. In total, according to the Cato Institute, you've reassigned 7,460 law enforcement away from their primary duties, investigating drug traffickers, prosecuting child pornography, targeting high-value white-collar criminals, and again, forcing them, this is according to the Cato Institute, into low-level immigration enforcement. This includes, in terms of gun violence, 1,778 agents from the ATF to this kind of immigration enforcement. The White House itself has said that they diverted 45% of all of agents in 25 FBI field offices to work on immigration full-time. As a person who worked very closely in my time as mayor with the New Jersey field office, that's really concerning given the other threats. But it doesn't end there. The DOJ has eliminated the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force, the independent component of the DOJ whose job it was to combat transnational organized crime, dissolved the Community Relations Service, which in New Jersey has been invaluable over 60 years, responding to communities experiencing conflict or violence, and something that people on both sides of the aisle of this committee have really invested in. You all have rescinded VOCA and VAWA grants to support survivors of sexual assault and human trafficking. There seems to be a disconnect here between the application of the resources of the Justice Department on the things that are most concerning when it comes to crime and where they're being directed instead.
Senator Booker, first to OCDEF. The most important point is that the work of OCDEF is continuing. The executive office is being dissolved. We have said that, but the work of OCDEF is continuing. The resources that were previously provided to law enforcement organizations through OCDEF are now going directly to those organizations. I will assure you, no work will be sacrificed as a result of getting rid of the executive office of OCDEF. The agents and the attorneys are working with Homeland Security. They're all working together as a unit.
Okay, Attorney General Bondi, I'm running out of time, and I'm going to put some questions in QFRs, because again, this is conservative think tanks and others are pointing about literally over 1,000 people being taken off of things that I think would concern the public. I'd like to get that, but I also just want to quickly mention that for the record, I want to ask about the public corruption unit as well. We now have gone from a public integrity section that went from 36 full-time prosecutors to now only 2. And yet we know, Democrats and Republicans, there is a real problem with public corruption in our country. And we know that the DOJ has stopped enforcing the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, disbanded the Foreign Influence Task Force, dismissed the indictment against Trump donor Andrew Weidenhorn, cut back on white-collar investigations. My list goes on. I'm running out of time, but I will ask for the record against not only reassigning officers and prosecutorial resources from the other things I mentioned, but public corruption is really important. I want to talk about an area of bipartisanship on this committee, which is antitrust. This is a very bipartisan area. In June, the Antitrust Division finalized a proposed consent decree with Hewlett-Packard Enterprises and Juniper Networks, settling the DOJ's challenge to the company's $14 billion merger. Reportedly, your Chief of Staff, Chad Mizell, and Acting Deputy Attorney General Woodard overruled career antitrust staff and approved the merger. This is a massive area of concern for Americans writ large. This is an area where corporate power is growing, corporate concentration in our country is happening at great degree. I'm grateful that the ranking member with Mike Lee on a committee that is really trying to get into this disturbing trend, and the issues right now in the Justice Department, the resources being put on it, and the appearance of improprieties that we're seeing are troubling. All I want to ask as my final question is, would you commit just to talk about antitrust to coming before the Antitrust Subcommittee led by Senator Lee to discuss antitrust enforcement in our country?
We're over time. May I answer, Chairman?
Yes.
Senator Booker, I work hand in hand with Gail Slater. She is doing an incredible job. I said that earlier. I will let Gail Slater handle all matters with antitrust. The HP matter, Juniper, is a pending matter still because, as you know, it has to go before the courts, even after a decision has been made, and that's where it's pending right now. If I can go back to your previous two questions, first about our agents being reassigned. Our agents are working tirelessly on their day jobs and with Homeland Security, and right now they're not getting paid, and they're on the streets during a government shutdown working to keep every city in this country safe, in New Jersey and in every state. They're working together with DHS on task forces, but they're also doing their core mission, and they're getting child predators off the street. They are working so hard with all the agencies hand in hand. That has not been sacrificed, and I'm so proud of the work that the FBI, DEA, ATF are doing. ATF agents have worked tirelessly. I am in constant contact with them on the incredible cases that they're making to keep our country safe and our world safe, especially our DEA agents who are stationed around this world, and now they're not getting paid. Back to the public integrity section, the last point you made. It has not been slashed. Those are going to the various U.S. attorney offices to be handled in each office around the country instead of one unit based in D.C.
Yeah.
Thank you, Senator.
Before Blackburn, my Democrat colleagues continue to criticize the DOJ for their role in President Trump's historic immigration crackdown. They've talked about due process. They've talked about the lack of transparency and oversight. However, my Democratic colleagues were silent about the former Biden administration failure to vet Afghan evacuees. Instead of coming clean, the Biden administration dismissed and failed to answer my oversight request. Not a peep from my colleagues about these massive vetting failures. The Department of Homeland Security Inspector General confirmed these vetting failures. Senator Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and AG Bondi, thank you for your time before us today. I have found this hearing to be so instructive because it has pointed out to me the lack of caring from my colleagues across the dais when it comes to how the DOJ under Biden was weaponized, how they used this for political attack on their political opponents, and the smugness from some of my colleagues across the dais. I think they enjoyed it. I think they wanted it to continue. And I think that's why they oppose some of the reforms that you are making to actually get people out across the country and to get them working, and to have people that are actually finding out what the FBI and the DOJ did. You look at what happened with Crossfire Hurricane and the way some Democrats tried to blow that up and make it some big issue and all about Donald Trump and the accusations. And of course, they've been proven wrong. You look at what has happened, what we're finding out about Arctic frost and the way we were surveilled, and the way Senator Graham, Senator Hawley, and I, we don't know what all they got. We don't know who all they tracked. But to tap our phones, to pull that data, for these wireless companies to have allowed them to have that, and for them to use it in their investigations, how disgusting is that? And their attitude and lack of concern about the weaponization of the DOJ. I've had a couple of colleagues who have been so concerned about some bureaucrats at the DOJ and the FBI being fired. You know what? If they did wrong, not only fire them, prosecute them. And my hope is that as we look at what happened with Arctic frost, that there will be a special counsel, that we will do our due diligence, and that those who did this wrong, this illegal activity, absolutely, they need to be prosecuted, and they need to face the full extent of accountability within the law. I made a note of how resistant they are to reform. And in my opinion, what this shows is that they don't want one tier of justice. What they want is two tiers of justice. It was their play box. They could get in there and manipulate and use it to spy on us. So they saw this as something that furthered their political goal. So I am pleased that you are cleaning house. And those who have not served the American people well, fire them. They need to be gone. They need to be gone. Talk for a moment, just a moment, about what you're doing to end the weaponization.
Senator Blackburn, the weaponization against you and your colleagues should greatly concern all of us. It should concern Democrats. It should concern Republicans. Yet, we don't see that. There was a two-tier system of justice under the Biden administration. We're learning that every day. We saw Jack Smith weaponize the Justice Department against Donald Trump. We saw the Biden administration weaponize the entire Justice Department, all of the law enforcement agencies, against Donald Trump, against his family members, against his friends for years and years. And that weaponization is over. No one is above the law, and there is a one-tier system of justice in this Justice Department.
And we
that's what we
appreciate
will
that.
continue to do.
We appreciate that. And, you know, having vice chaired the president's transition in 2016, as you remember, there was surveillance that took place on the transition and on the transition team. So this is not the first time, it's the second time. And shame be to those that have furthered those lies and what James Comey did to this country, what Christopher Wray allowed to happen to this country. I want to talk to you about Memphis, the Memphis Safe Task Force. And you, President Trump, Director Patel, the work you're doing there is really quite amazing. I had pulled those latest stats, and we had 503 arrests with the FBI task force in July and August. We've added, with your Memphis Safe Task Force, just last week, 321 arrests, 83 firearms that were seized, 7 missing children that were recovered, 28 known gang members have been arrested, and the list continues to grow. We've also gotten over 120 federal indictments. But this is really quite a success story, and I think that cities like Portland and Chicago are missing out by not having this coordinated, focused effort. And the fact that there are 13 federal and state agencies working together to make Memphis safe again. And we are very grateful about that. One of the things that we are working on is to end a cashless bail. We have a very liberal DA in Memphis that has campaigned on avoiding cash bail. And we had a good hearing on this last week. And we have legislation, Representative Stefanik and I have legislation that would end cash bail, cashless bail in DC, and then also would remove funds from jurisdictions that practice cashless bail. Touch on that and the importance of having cash bail for that accountability, keeping those criminals off the streets.
Yeah, Senator Blackburn, first to Memphis. I was in Memphis, as you know, a few days ago with Secretary Hegseth, and we had about 1,100 officers from at least 13 agencies working hand in hand. Your Memphis police officers care. They want to be out there doing their jobs. And what we said is we have federal law enforcement officers now who have their backs. They were thrilled to have us there. The mayor, Paul Young, is working well with us. Of course, Governor Lee was there. You have been a champion of this. Senator Haggerty has been a champion of this. You both, before I was sworn in as Attorney General, you both brought this problem to my attention. You talked to Director Patel, and Director Patel was on the ground right away in Memphis attempting to make Memphis safe. But we knew we needed so much more than that. He put a huge dent in the problem. But Memphis's crime is through the roof, the highest violent crime rate in the entire country. And that's why we went to Memphis. And Memphis has welcomed us. It's an iconic city. And we want to continue to work with Memphis. And we're going to do that just like we did here in DC. The citizens have been great working with us. Violent crime shouldn't be occurring in any of these cities. And as you said, I don't understand why Chicago, why Portland, why these sanctuary jurisdictions don't want to work with the federal government.
No.
Gangs are rampant. Transnational gangs are rampant in these cities because they're harboring them, no longer under Donald Trump. Whether they want to or not, we are going to come in and make it safe for their citizens, whether these liberal lawmakers want to or not. And you know what I said regarding the DA in Memphis? I said, we're going to protect the Memphis police officers. We're going to take every single case federally that we can, because the DA has cashless bail. It's a revolving door, and no one is being held accountable. Police officers are seeing someone arrested, and they're back out on the streets the next night committing crimes. And Janine Pirro is working on that here in D.C. to change that as well. So thank you for your legislation.
We appreciate that, and the Memphis mayor is doing great. We had a Shelby County official who was trying to dox some of these officers, and she's since taken this tweet down, but she's an elected official. And she goes, attention, on Peabody between McLean and Cooper, 4 fed vehicles and a trooper, men in full gear and guns on street. Hashtag pay attention, folks. This is the kind of action that is not called for. I mean, the fact that an elected official would do this, this is why we have legislation that would make it a crime to dox any federal law enforcement official when they are doing their job. And these apps, and Apple and Google say that they've removed these apps, but I tell you what, These law enforcement officers need to be protected. We appreciate that you are doing that. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Senator.
Evidence that the Obama-Biden State Department obstructed law enforcement efforts to arrest high-level Iranian targets. This objection, led by then Secretary John Kerry, was done because of political consideration of the failed Iran nuclear deal. Senator Padilla.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the opportunity to participate in this hearing today, which is our, at minimum, annual opportunity to ask questions as we fulfill our obligation to provide accountability over the Department of Justice. So just sort of to level set a little bit for folks in the audience and for folks watching at home, the Department of Justice is supposed to be the nation's guardian of fairness and the rule of law. The power of the Department of Justice is built on public trust and a belief that prosecutions are based on facts and law, not on politics or personal loyalty. And I call that out, Mr. Chairman, because when that breaks down, when the public trust breaks down, then justice itself is at risk. But under this Trump administration and the leadership of Attorney General Bondi, I believe the independence of the Department of Justice has come under attack. The department has been reorganized, it's been realigned, and repurposed in ways that we've never seen before. Important offices have been closed, key programs dismantled, and agents diverted, all without congressional authorization or transparent justification. Now, these are not minor bureaucratic changes. They represent a fundamental shift in the Department of Justice's missions and priorities, its policies, and its practices. Now, for example, career prosecutors have been pressured to change decisions in politically sensitive cases. Ethics oversight has been taken away from independent career professionals and handed to political appointees with little experience in these matters. Internal working groups have been created to revisit investigations involving President Trump and his allies. And together, these steps send a dangerous message that prosecutorial decisions can be driven by political loyalty instead of the law. Now, even more troubling is that the Department of Justice has pulled resources away from organized crime, away from counterterrorism, away from the protection of civil rights, to focus on immigration enforcement. The American people expect a Department of Justice to pursue violent crime, as do I, to pursue corruption and threats to national security, not to serve as an arm of immigration policy, and in so doing, under-resource other critical missions. Now, the Justice Department's credibility depends on the public's faith in justice, and that the justice will be applied equally to every person and not reserved for the powerful or the connected. And that faith must be protected. And so it's in that spirit that this committee has a duty to ensure the department's work remains lawful, remains transparent, and remains true to its highest duty, the fair and impartial administration of justice. Now, that being said, I do want to get into some specific items with Attorney General Bondi here, beginning with the firing of Michelle Beckwith. Michelle Beckwith was a 15-year career prosecutor with the Department of Justice. She prosecuted in her career some of the worst in my home state of California: sex traffickers, transnational terrorists, those who this administration claims to care about and be targeting, prioritizing in taking them off the streets. And it may surprise some to learn that Ms. Beckwith was unceremoniously marched out of her office and fired from her job in July of this year. Why? not because she failed to do her job, quite the opposite. It was because she had the audacity to remind Border Patrol Chief Gregory Bovino that he was obligated to follow a court order and the Constitution in California. According to reports, she was fired less than 6 hours after she told Bovino he couldn't arrest people without probable cause. 6 hours. So my first question, Attorney General Bondi, is a simple yes/no question. Do you believe that government officials like Gregory Bovino are obligated to follow applicable court orders, whether they agree with them or not, yes or no?
First, Senator Padilla, you have gone on for over 5 minutes, and I wish that you loved your state of California as much as you hate President Trump. We'd be in really good shape then, because violent crime in California is currently 35% higher than the national average. Property crime in California is 18% higher than the national average. That should be something that we should be talking about and working together on, yet we're not. And no, this is important. You're talking about all of my agencies, and I want to let you know what DEA has been doing, and they are working hand in hand with
I
Homeland
appreciate
Security.
that, and I'm going
No,
to be
you can't
asking
go
some
on for
questions
5
for the
minutes and
record
criticize
as
my agents
well.
who are out working
asked a simple
without
yes
pay
or no
right
question.
now because you voted
Mr.
to
Chairman.
shut down the government.
Mr.
They're out
Chairman.
there working without pay.
Mr. Chairman, I asked a simple yes or no question. Attorney General Bondi is
DEA,
refusing
4,500
to respond.
kilos
So let
of
me move on to
fentanyl
the
and
next
50 million
topic,
fentanyl pills
because
off the streets.
while under your watch,
FBI,
prosecutors
23,000
Mr. Chairman,
violent criminals. U.S. Marshals,
Mr. Chairman, order, please.
51,000 fugitives.
I'm trying to get, I'm not getting an answer to my question. I'm trying to move on to the next question or the next topic. Mr. Chairman, order, please. Thank you. Because under Attorney General Bondi's watch, career prosecutors are being fired for telling agencies to follow the law and uphold the Constitution. Meanwhile, there are instances of allies of the president who seem to be getting let off the hook. I won't reiterate what some of my colleagues have already brought up in terms of the dismissal of the investigation into Tom Homan and his alleged acceptance of $50,000 as payment by undercover FBI agents posing as business executives looking to secure contracts with a future Trump administration. Because if the reports are true, it's not just the underlying conduct of Mr. Homan, which would be absolutely unacceptable, but the dismissal of the investigation charges raises concerns about the influence of the White House on the Department of Justice. Again, a simple question, and I'd appreciate a simple and brief answer. Whose decision was it to end this investigation?
I have answered that question multiple times, yet you didn't have the courtesy to be sitting in here for the hearing. I'm not going to answer it again. And I find it interesting that you want order in this proceeding now. Excuse me, Senator.
Then
you
I'll
want
ask a
order in this
follow-up question.
proceeding
Mr.
now.
Chairman, order,
you sure
please.
didn't
I'll
have
ask a
order when
follow-up
you
question.
stormed Secretary Noem
Mr. Chairman,
at a press
Mr.
conference
Chairman,
in
order,
California,
please.
did you?
I will ask a follow-up question. Would you commit to either releasing the tape or at least making it available for members of this committee to review, yes or no?
Senator, you have not been sitting in here this entire hearing. I've answered the question, and I also want to tell
Have
you that
not
our
answered
ATF
a
agents
question
have
about
seized
whether or not you would release
25,000
the tape, Ms.
illegal
Bondi.
firearms.
So we will try again and move on to a
In
different
your
topic.
home state, we are prosecuting
Chairman,
illegal
order,
aliens
please.
who have
Mr.
raped and
Chairman,
murdered young
order, please.
girls.
Thank you. So when I haven't been in this hearing, I've been watching from my office, monitoring the entire hearing, just so everybody is aware. But since I'm not getting answers to my questions, I'll try to ask one last subject area. Now, again, there's been increasing concerns about the politicized decision-making and the erosion of internal safeguards that protect prosecutorial independence. Before we even get into the integrity and independence of prosecutions, we get into, you have to ask the question about the independence and integrity of investigations themselves. The director of the FBI, Director Patel, was here before us just a few weeks ago. Attorney General Bondi, you are the Attorney General of the United States. Director Patel reports to you. Do you believe he's doing a good job, yes or no?
I believe Director Patel is doing a great job. You know where he is right now, Senator Padilla? Right now,
heard-
you asked me a question.
Yes, I
Director
know where
Patel
he
right
is, and I
now
know
is
where
in
he's headed
Chicago,
because you said it
Senator
earlier
Durbin,
in the hearing.
fighting to keep
You've said it
Chicago
earlier in the hearing, and yes, I have been paying
You know,
attention.
you want order in here
Chairman.
now, yet you stormed the Director of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem. You sure didn't have order that day, did you, Senator?
Attorney General, you are under oath. I did not storm the secretary, the video.
Oh, that was
makes
on
that very
video. That
clear.
video's been released, I believe, very public.
Mr. Chairman, recent actions raise serious concerns about Director Patel's judgment and politicization, including lawsuits from former FBI officials alleging retaliatory firings and his decision to cut off longstanding partnerships with civil rights organizations and his decision to fire an FBI agent for refusing to engage in a, quote, perp walk of James Comey. And on top of all that, his prematurely claiming that subjects were in custody after the shooting of Charlie Kirk. I take Attorney General Bondi's endorsement today of his work as her support for those actions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
May I respond, Senator Chairman?
Yes.
Under Director Patel, 23,000 violent criminals have been arrested, a 91% increase over last year. More than 1,500 child predators have been arrested. We are making cases in your jurisdiction constantly in California, and I wish you would care about those cases. We have disrupted 1,600 gangs and criminal enterprises, 1,600 gangs within this country, thanks to Director Patel and the great men and women of the FBI.
Senator Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How are you today, Attorney General? It's good to see you.
Have a rough voice. But thanks.
I have to say, I am struck by the degree of the cognitive dissonance that I hear on the other side. It really is. I mean, I'm used to sort of the political debates and arguing in court and all those sorts of things. But to hear the other side of the dais talk about weaponization is truly shocking, given what we know now. And I thought what I might do is just tell a story. And these are 100% facts. Hillary Clinton, concerned about her email scandal, works with a Soros organization to cook up this Russiagate nonsense. They feed it to the intelligence agencies. And they spy, under Barack Obama's presidency, they spy on the political opponent, the Republican, running against Hillary Clinton. He gets elected. They continue the operation, and they launder this intelligence into stuff that was meant to, by the FBI and the CIA, to sideline a presidency of a duly elected president of the United States of America, to sideline him. And that continued. You heard even some people on this committee further that nonsense for 4 years. And then the FBI is involved with pre-bunking the Hunter Biden laptop story because they didn't want him to get elected again. So they pre-bunked the Hunter Biden laptop story. The American people should have been allowed to make their own judgments from that. They weren't, because the FBI called it a Russian hack and leak operation. They were meeting with social media companies every month and every week, telling them that the laptop that they knew, that they had verified in November of 2019, they knew was real and knew was his, said it was Russian disinformation. We've heard that before. And then, after Joe Biden comes in, 3 days in, they start a censorship campaign against the country, anybody who's a conservative. And now we also know that the FBI was weaponized in this Arctic frost investigation that tapped the phones of sitting U.S. senators. And also, the Republican Attorneys General Association, so let's pull in 2 more U.S. senators, Ashley Moody and myself, who were on the executive committee at that time. Charlie Kirk, political organizations they didn't agree with. This is not in the Soviet Union in the 1980s. This is in the United States of America in the last few years. And then, when they thought President Trump was on the run and there's no way people would elect him, and then he announces he's running for president, 3 days later, Jack Smith's appointed to get Trump. Fani Willis brings charges against President Trump, and the assistant prosecutor meets with the White House counsel's office. Why would that happen? Then you have Alvin Bragg bring his charges. The number 3 person at DOJ goes to work for him to get Trump. All in the United States of America. This continued. And Senator Hawley asked the question, wrote it down, what is happening in this country? And I hope that MSNBC is still broadcasting this, because I'm sure their viewership hasn't heard this story that's gone on for 10 years. The truth is, they never forgave President Trump for coming down the escalator at all. They didn't like him. They didn't like the disruption. And they've spent the better part of a decade not just going after him, but demonizing half the country as fascists and Nazis and threats to democracy. And they have fueled this division in their inability to accept the fact that half of the country isn't deplorables, as Hillary Clinton called her, bitter clingers, as Barack Obama called them, or trash, as Joe Biden called them. That they rose up and they sat in their own jury box and they saw all this stuff play out over a decade and they rejected it. And now you have come in to clean that up, and you are doing a great job in doing that. And let me make this clear. There is a big difference between what happened under the Biden regime and the weaponization, and then holding those people accountable. That is not weaponization. If that doesn't happen, this will happen all over again. So your job, as you talked about in your confirmation hearing, is so important that this never happens again. And holding people accountable who are part of this conspiracy is absolutely your job. And I'm also taking, you don't have to comment on this, your unwillingness to answer questions that have come up. I am led to believe, as a former attorney general, that that might mean there's an ongoing investigation. You don't have to talk about it. The statute of limitations may have run on some of this stuff, but not on a conspiracy. And if you're a co-conspirator in mile marker 1, even if you want to get on the exit ramp in mile marker 5, you are liable for the conspiracy in mile marker 10. And we are at mile marker 10. And I will also say what's happening in this country. What's happening with the assault on ICE officers is truly shocking. Deportations are nothing new. Bill Clinton deported 12 million people. 12 million people. You didn't see this. The radicalization that's happened on the left that plays out with political violence is real. And by the way, let me also point out that if we had a scenario where John Thune was on the Supreme Court steps saying, "You've reaped a whirlwind, Supreme Court justices," and then a right-wing assassin tried to kill Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and then a Republican-appointed judge only gave that person 8 years, there would be riots on the streets. Cities would be burning right now. So let's just call it out. We need the cleansing here. Let's just be truthful about what's happening. This left-wing political alliance, violence is not a both sides thing. It's not. And so, Attorney General, I do want to ask you a couple questions about that, because I feel like we have got to get a handle on this. Despite the overwhelming evidence that the political violence threat right now comes primarily from the left, the media just won't do it. They won't go along with it. They cite a few ridiculous studies to say that right-wing political violence is the main problem. For example, one of those studies was written by an Antifa-affiliated professor, and others count classes on prison gang, and the others count classes on prison gang violence as right-wing political violence, but refuse to count anything from the 2020 Summer of Love. Antifa attacks, like the ones that set off the explosive outside Michael Knowles' campus speech. We need good data. We need good data here. Will you commit to having the Department of Justice and the FBI research and release a public report on left-wing political violence?
Yes, Senator Schmidt.
Thank you. I also want to, after Antifa has laid siege on federal buildings and officers in Portland during the 2020 riots, your predecessor, Merrick Garland, dropped virtually all the cases against these defendants. You recently issued a new charging memo instructing federal prosecutors to aggressively pursue Antifa and other radical leftists wreaking havoc on our cities. What can you do to ensure that the various U.S. attorneys' offices follow through on your instructions?
Hopefully we will have our U.S. attorneys confirmed soon. They've been held up. Now our government is in a shutdown, yet our prosecutors are still working. Getting all of our U.S. attorneys confirmed would be a huge step forward, Senator Schmidt, But yes, our attorneys throughout this country will be focusing on that.
And I want to thank you too. So I talked to you during your confirmation hearing and also with Kash Patel of sort of, you talked about your two pillars, which is to end the weaponization and to get back to actually crime fighting. God bless. Like, that is something that the American people support, despite what you hear from the other side of the dais today. And in those conversations, we talked about you and Kash Patel getting field agents out in the field and doing the work of law enforcement. I said, I've got just the place for you, St. Louis. And St. Louis has now received the largest per capita infusion of permanent FBI agents anywhere in the country, and they're working hand in hand with local law enforcement. That's what happens when you have state leaders work with federal partners to crack down on something I hope we could all agree is a scourge for our communities, which is violent crime. But that is not, J.B. Pritzker, I guess he wants his moment. These Portland people want their moment of defying Trump. It's crazy to me. We should all be unified in this effort of making sure our laws are enforced and taking on violent crime. But I will say, in closing with this, because you referenced the shutdown, it's the same motivation. The same thing that motivates J.B. Pritzker to stand in front of the podium and defy Trump is the same motivation I hear from my Democrat colleagues now in this shutdown. It's not about anything other than the fact, and this is a clean CR. This is what they have lectured us on making sure we do 13 times in the last 4 years. This is about appeasing an increasingly radical base to prove that they're willing to stand up to President Trump. And I don't know how we get through all this unless there's a real reckoning on the other side about that reality. But in the meantime, I'm glad you're doing what your job is, which is to be the chief law enforcement officer of this country, focusing on violent crime and keeping our communities safe.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Schmidt. And despite what they're saying on the other side of the aisle, our agents are out there working tirelessly every day to make America safe. And that was Donald Trump's directive, and we will make it happen.
Thank you, Senator Schmidt. Senator Welch.
Thank you. Thank you, Attorney General Bondi. I have noticed that at various times when one of my colleagues is pressing you, you come up with something in their background. So I'll be waiting for my turn, but you don't have to do it right now. So let me get to my questions. One of the things that you mentioned, and I agree with this, that it's really tough on the various federal workforce, including our law enforcement folks, who are not getting paid because of the shutdown. Mm-hmm. I agree with that. But I also think that wasn't the whole story. There is an issue here that's going to affect Americans, whether they voted for President Trump or voted for Vice President Harris, and that is the loss of health care, where on November 1st, everyone who is getting Affordable Care Act help to buy insurance is going to get the notice of premium increases. And I got a letter just today from a Vermont family, nuclear family of 5, husband and wife, 54 and 55, with 3 kids, one of whom has acute myeloid leukemia. And the apprehension that they have is that if we don't solve this problem, and November 1 is a urgent date, then their family premiums will triple. It'll be beyond their ability to pay. So I'm assuming that with respect to the threat to health care for families in your state of Florida, in my state of Vermont, you would share that concern and hope that we would resolve that.
Senator Welch, I would be happy to speak with that family too, because there are many nonprofits that help with children with terminal illnesses, and I'm involved in some in Florida. So we would be happy to talk to you about that. As to health care, the government is shut down. It's my understanding, maybe you're not one of them, but because many Democrats want health care for illegal aliens, and that's what shut down the government.
Let me
That's
be clear.
one of the sticking points, and I don't know if you voted
All right, well,
for that or not.
this actually is important to all of us. And the lament I have is that if this health care goes away, this premium support, it is really going to hurt families in red states and blue states. And in Vermont, I mean, we voted Democratic, but we have a lot of good folks who voted for President Trump, and their health care
is jeopardized. And there's a November 1 deadline that is coming up. And the reason I'm saying this is that I think it's important for us to try to work out together a resolution that's going to be beneficial to people you care about in Florida and voted for President Trump, and people I care about in Vermont who voted in some cases for Vice President Harris and some for President Trump. So it's not just Democrats not wanting to negotiate. And in fact, we do want to negotiate. And that's why I'd encourage the president to encourage my colleagues on the Republican side to sit down with us and try to see if we can make some progress. Another topic, with the respect to voting rights in the letter that your voting rights chief sent out, we got one in Vermont, and it's a demand to get all the information on the voting file. And in that letter, in the announcement of that letter, the chief indicated an apprehension about the voting process being taken over by, quote, the left. Now, do you have any information with respect to Vermont about a takeover of the voting process by, quote, the left?
Senator, I'm not familiar with what you're referring to. We are currently involved in voter roll lawsuits in 6 states. Is that what you're referring to?
No, there's a letter that went out demanding that states, including Vermont, provide all the voting file information,
Right.
includes personal information. But when that letter was sent out,
That's perfectly legal.
but there was an assertion by the chief in this division that this was to deal with the fact that the voting process has been taken over by the left. So we got one of those letters in Vermont. And my question to you is, what do you mean by the left? And do you have any evidence that the so-called system has been overtaken by the left?
We must have fair and free elections.
No, I know that. But I'm asking for the specific basis.
And we will have fair and free elections in this country.
Okay, let me-
Senator, I'd be happy to talk to my chief. Who was it who said that?
It was your chief, which I assume you would know who that is. Here's the question here, okay? There is a point of view that is in dispute here about the fairness of elections. But you have the power as the as the Attorney General to use the authority of your office to make demands on states. And you did that with Vermont. That's within your right to do it. I'm not disputing your legal authority to do it.
Is Vermont disputing turning over the information to our office?
Vermont is, the Secretary of State is. And you can resolve that with her, but.
And we have every right to have that information,
here's where
Senator.
I'm going.
Why wouldn't they want to turn it over?
You're a prosecutor with the awesome authority to make the decision that you're going to start an investigation against the state or against an individual. And I know from your experience as a county prosecutor and as the Attorney General in Florida, you took seriously that factual basis before you'd proceed, right?
Senator, I take that role, I take my oath very seriously.
All right, so what I'm
And I
asking-
take fair and free elections in this
No,
country
we
very
all-
seriously.
we all
And that
do.
information, our office is entitled to have that information.
But
And we
the
are
question
involved in
here-
litigation on that, and I
Here's the
assume we'll be
question
involved
I
in
have.
litigation with
We have-
Vermont.
We have a Republican governor in Vermont. We had, our former Republican governor was was the treasurer for many years, and also the Secretary of State with election responsibility. What I'm asking is, do you or does your head of this voting section have any factual basis that you can point to that justifies your demand that Vermont turn over all this confidential voting rights information?
Well, it would remain confidential with my office, and you just said that you have a Republican governor, so it doesn't make sense what you just said. We've asked that of every state, Senator.
Right, and I'm asking about Vermont and what the factual basis is, but we can move on. You've mentioned that you can't discuss pending litigation, and I think the committee by and large accepted that answer. But I did notice that you spoke at great length about pending litigation, specifically with respect to the questions Senator Cruz asked you about the sentencing of the Kavanaugh defendant. That's pending, right?
He was sentenced to 8 years.
I understand that, but that's on appeal, right?
We will be appealing.
Right, so that makes it pending litigation. So you made an exception with respect to
No.
the Cruz questions.
Hold on. No,
But you
those
didn't
were-
answer
those were
any of the
things-
questions that you said were pending in litigation from any of my colleagues.
Those were facts that came out at the sentencing hearing. You're welcome to see the transcript of the sentencing hearing.
I
with all
understand
the
that.
gruesome details of what they threatened to do to Justice Kavanaugh and other justices.
I condemn what that person did.
That was the sentencing.
But the point here is that that's pending litigation. You indicated you're going to be appealing. It's your right to do that. And you would not, you use that justification to not answer many other questions.
Justification, you're an attorney, Senator.
Okay.
You realize that.
I do want to go back to Homan. You know, there's a tape, right, with Mr. Homan? I mean, first of all, is there a tape that has audio and video of the transfer of the $50,000?
You would have to talk to Director Patel about that.
No, I'm talking to you.
I don't know the answer, Senator.
Yeah, you do know the answer to
Don't
that.
call me a liar.
I didn't call you a liar.
You just said I know the answer. I said I don't know the answer.
Well,
You have to talk to
okay, let
Director
me-
Patel.
let-
What I said is that
Let me
investigation
put it
was
another way.
closed.
If you don't know, why don't you know whether there was a tape and video?
Senator, I believe that was resolved prior to my confirmation as Attorney General.
Do you think that it is of public interest for the people to know what happened to the $50,000 that the FBI turned over to Homan?
Did you hear what I just said? That was resolved prior to my confirmation as Attorney General. That's why
Not
I
res-
said I
it's
would not know.
It
The
is.
first,
It's not resolved. There's $50,000. Homan has it, or somebody has it. Do you have no interest in knowing where it is?
you're not going to sit here and slander Tom Homan. The FBI and Deputy Director Blanche said there was nothing.
I'm not slamming
And
Tom Homan. He got the 50
Tom
grand.
Homan is doing, how do you know that? Tom Homan is doing a great job, as our borders are, keeping your border state safe. You're a border state.
Thank you,
time is
Senator
up.
Welch.
Thank
We're
you.
going to
Madam
turn it.
President, could
No,
I have
not right
1
now.
minute?
Not right now. At the end,
On a
if you wait, we'll
point of
talk about
personal
it.
privilege?
Not right now. There,
The
Senator
witness-
Tillis and many others have been waiting their
Would-
turn.
I know,
so
but
you
this is
can
1
hold
minute,
until
and
the
it
end.
relates to testimony that she gave
No,
about me.
Senator Tillis, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. General Bondi, thank you for being here. I'm going to get parochial for a bit of time. Maybe I have some time for some of the other questions, but the eastern band of the Cherokee is this island that's at the very end of western North Carolina. You got convergence of Tennessee and Georgia, South Carolina nearby. But they're an island and they sell pot, and I got no problem with that. What I have a problem with is some of their actions or activities that are, I think, concerning me that actually speak to the broader issue here about marijuana and what we ultimately do with it, with nearly 36 states having it either medical, recreational, or hybrid. But this kind of feels like, to me, the way the tobacco industry got attacked for advertising to young people. We already know, incidentally, that we got a vape problem around here, particularly among young people. And Madam Chair, if I may, I'd like to seek unanimous consent for letters from the Sheriff's Association and the Federal Law Enforcement Officers Association Foundation citing the serious problem we have here with illegal vapes in this country.
Without objection.
Thank you. But, you know, this worries me because it's a money-making enterprise. It kind of seems like it's preying on younger people. But then I want to talk about this handy app you can get now. Now, it's illegal in North Carolina and Tennessee and Georgia and South Carolina to buy pot, but apparently you can go order it on an app, then right over there to the boundary and get it, I assume that they're not delivering it outside of the boundary, because I think that would be illegal. Would that be illegal?
Senator, thank you for pointing that out. I was not familiar with that app, but we will certainly look at that.
Yeah. Do you, if I get, let's say I get an illegal, let's get a vape from China. A lot of them are manufactured in China, not
The
subject
majority.
to anywhere near the sort of scrutiny that we have here in the United States. If that illegal vape let's say it's, I don't know what it's loaded with, but it gets if it's illegal in the state of North Carolina, and let's say it comes in, I'm using a hypothetical example, into the port of Wilmington, and then finds its way to New York or some other state that has legalized marijuana, is that an illegal transportation of a controlled substance? In other words, unless it teleports into a legal jurisdiction, wouldn't it have been illegally transported at some point?
Based on federal law, Senator.
Based on
yes.
federal law, okay. Now, do you, are you familiar with the science of teleportation?
No, Senator.
I don't think it's been perfected yet. And so it requires a physical movement from one place to the other. I've asked a number of people when they've come before this committee, and hopefully I can get your attention on this too, General Bondi. There's a growing operation in Western North Carolina that is a part of the tribal lands. The problem is I can't find any legal way to get this pot that is grown here to the dispensary that's in another non-contiguous area of the boundary. So you see what I mean? I'm just trying to figure out how the eastern band of the Cherokee are legally transporting what they're growing at scale here to what they're advertising in Charlotte on the billboards as one of the country's largest dispensaries, and apparently also offering to let you buy it online. So can I get your commitment within the DOJ, not you personally, but that can I just get a definitive answer that there's no there, that they are legally transporting it, or that we do have something here that doesn't seem to comport with federal law?
Yeah, Senator, I will absolutely have my team look at that issue, and I'm not familiar with that establishment.
Yeah, well, it's, like I said, it's an island. I really think the federal government needs to step up. We need to get rid of this neither fish nor fowl sort of status that marijuana has in this country now. I think the people have spoken, many red states, even your home state, my home state, has, I think probably many states, I should say, not just the state of Florida, are trending towards legalizing it. We've got to get it solved at the federal level. We've got to capture revenue. That revenue needs to go back to federal law enforcement, and we need to have a lot more focus on what I think are unsafe and inconsistent practices across the state. So if I could get that, I would appreciate it. General Bondi, I'm kind of a boring management consultant, nerd that believes in best practices as a way to kind of move forward and create consistent outcomes. I'm having a real struggle right now with the National Guard being deployed and masking the abject failure of leaders at the state and local level. So give me some sense of if the deployment of the National Guard to Chicago or Portland is necessary to kind of create a shock to the system, do you believe that that's a best practice or just a necessary evil until we regen the extraordinary work I've seen on joint task forces every day in North Carolina with absolute cooperation between state, federal, and local officials? Is that the best practice that we should get to, or is this deployment of the National Guard a part of an emerging best practice that I just don't get yet?
Yeah, Senator Tillis, seeing what's happening in Chicago, they need the National Guard. Our ICE members need the National Guard to protect the national buildings.
Oh, 100%. I'm talking about
That's
when it
why
wades
they're
into
being
local law
deployed.
enforcement. See, I felt like deployment in D.C. made sense because of the hybrid nature of D.C. What I'm saying is outside of that defending federal buildings and federal law enforcement, addressing, I think you mentioned over 500 murders in Chicago, it would just seem to me that all those
571.
bums should be thrown out in an election. And are we masking an underlying problem that will come back the minute we leave? That's what I'm talking about, not the protection of federal buildings and federal law enforcement officers, but almost the sense of they become an arm of local law enforcement. I don't consider that a best practice. It doesn't sound like you do either.
Well, I don't believe our National Guard want to be doing that, but they're going to be where they have to be to keep Americans safe. In Memphis right now, the highest violent crime rate in the country. I was on the ground with Secretary Hegseth there, and our Guard was there, and they were thrilled. They're ready to help, and we used all Tennessee Guard there. Secretary Hegseth used all Tennessee Guard. They're working hand in hand with the Memphis Police Department, who I believe were very happy to have them there, helping them to keep Memphis safe. Can I go back to the vaping again that you brought up, please, Senator? So I went to Chicago, actually, with Secretary Kennedy, and it was just outside of Chicago in a suburb, and we were there talking about the illegal vapes and what parents need to know. This is a bipartisan issue. What people need to know, these illegal vapes, they're all over this country. You can buy them in convenience stores. You can buy them in grocery stores. One vape is the equivalent of, I believe, 20 cigarettes. The flavored ones are illegal, and they're targeting children, what you said earlier. Some of these vapes, and I had never seen this until we were there, even have video games attached to them. That's not targeting an adult. It's targeting a child. And they're also, the majority, are coming in from China, which is illegal, and they're lacing them with THC. Now, right now, I can't say that I have seen deaths with fentanyl laced, but we want to get on the front end of this because that's what's next.
We have to do
If we don't control this in every single one of our states, that's what's next. And for the first time, we're getting on the front end of a very serious problem around our country. And Senator Moody, you fought this as well. So thank you for letting me address that, Senator Tillis. And parents need to know that.
We do. We need to focus on it. And all I'm saying from a political standpoint is that if we're only, well, let's get President Trump is termed out. He'll only be able to serve out his second term. And I believe the president is absolutely focused on making these dangerous cities safer. I reject any notion that Charlotte's on that list, by the way. So whether you're a Democrat or Republican, bring it on. But I see 3.5 years from now, if we don't address the systemic problems, that what we've basically done is given a governor and mayor and city councilman a pass on failing to protect their people. I was formerly Speaker of the House in North Carolina. If I thought I had to have the president deploy troops to keep North Carolina safe, I would have considered myself a failure as a state leader. And so I just hope we strike the balance so that we're not fixing a problem temporarily, only to come back maybe even worse than the problem we're fixing the moment this president who's committed to local safety leaves. And that's something that we have to talk about. So we're leaving something behind. And I'm going to yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tillis. Senator Schiff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Attorney General Bondi, at your confirmation hearing in January, made a clear commitment you would not politicize your position. We are here today at your first oversight hearing 9 months into your tenure, at a time when hundreds of career prosecutors have quit because they were required to take unethical actions at odds with that promise, or feared that they would have to take such actions if they remained on the job. When over 1,000 former federal prosecutors have sounded the alarm about the unprecedented degree to which the powers of DOJ are being abused to go after the president's enemies. I approach this hearing with a heavy heart. As a former federal prosecutor myself, I served in a department that, whether it was under a Democratic or Republican president, would never use the office to go after the president's enemies or to hide the corruption of his friends. But today, the Justice Department has been used to cover up the possible corruption of the mayor of New York, or of a high-level administration official taking $50,000 reportedly in cash in a bag, or a child sex predator who befriended the president and some of his cabinet members. And instead of preventing partisan weaponization, your department has engaged in a brazenly political prosecution at the president's explicit direction. The department has become President Trump's personal sword and shield to go after his ever-growing list of political enemies and to protect himself, his allies, and associates. My questions therefore focus on these two themes: hiding the corrupt acts of his friends and prioritizing the political prosecution of his enemies. So let me start with the shocking allegations of bribery and pay to play. 2 weeks ago, 4 major media outlets reported that Tom Homan, the president's top deportation official working in the White House, took $50,000 in cash in a bag from undercover FBI agents in September 2024, just over a year ago. According to these reports, Homan indicated he would facilitate securing contracts in exchange for money once he was in office in a future Trump administration. Reportedly, this exchange was caught on tape. Rather than pursue this investigation without fear or favor, the department and the FBI under your leadership or that of your predecessor before you confirmed quietly shut it down. Once news broke, your deputy and FBI director issued a joint public statement confirming that the Trump administration closed the investigation. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt denied Homan took the $50,000, telling a reporter, quote, "Mr. Homan never took the $50,000 that you're referring to, so you should get your facts straight." So today I hope you can help us get our facts straight. Was that true, what the White House press secretary said when she denied Homan took the money? Did he take the money?
Senator Schiff, as I stated earlier, I was not in office. I was not confirmed when that was handled.
So does that mean?
Deputy Attorney General Blanche and Director Patel said that there was no evidence that Tom Homan committed a crime. Yet now you're putting his picture up to slander him.
No, I'm putting, his picture up showing an interview he gave with, I think, Fox, in which he was asked explicitly about these allegations that he took a $50,000 bribe, and he refused to answer. He said he didn't answer the question whether he took the money, so I'm asking you the question. Did he take the money?
Senator Schiff, I answered that question multiple times. And frankly,
Well, I don't think, with respect, I don't think you did. But in case I just didn't hear you, what is the answer? Did he take the money?
Senator Schiff, that happened prior to my confirmation as Attorney General. I said that.
Do you know, sitting here, whether
All
he
I
took the money?
know is that Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche and FBI Director Patel said there was no case. And Caroline Leavitt is one of the most trustworthy human beings I know.
So
And,
was she?
Senator Schiff, if you
right?
worked for me, you would have been fired because you were censured by Congress for lying with your
we can
egregious
stipulate to, you can stipulate to all your personal attacks on the Democratic members of the committee.
personal attacks. You've been attacking my FBI director. You've been attacking my office. You've been attacking.
What we're interested in,
borders are.
what we're interested in is the answer to these oversight questions.
So you were asked by my colleague.
You were asked by my colleague.
Attacking good people.
Regular order, Madam Chair, so I can ask a question. You were asked by my colleague from Vermont whether you will support providing a video or audio tape, if it exists, of Mr. Homan taking $50,000 in bribe money from the FBI. Will you support a request by this committee to provide that tape or tapes to the committee? Yes or no?
Senator Schiff, you can talk to Director Patel about that.
Well, I'm talking to you about it. You're the Attorney General. This will be your decision. Will you
You
support?
don't have to tell me what is my decision and what is
then-
not
then-
my decision.
then-
I
and
said
you- and
you
you
can
don't
talk
have
to
to-
Director
and you don't
Patel.
have to try to-
You think
you
you've
don't
got a
have to-
gotcha with Tom Homan, our borders are.
Excuse me. You
Who's
don't-
been out there
excuse me.
fighting for our country
Madam
since
Chair,
Donald Trump took office.
I'm trying to ask a question. Regular order, please. And you don't have to defer to the FBI director to pass the buck. So I'm asking you, will you support a request so that the committee, or indeed, I believe the American people should be able to see that video or audio tape? Will you support that request?
Will you apologize to Donald Trump
So
for
I
trying
guess,
to
I
impeach
guess the
him
answer is you won't support that
after
request.
you now know that
So
Joe
let
Biden
me-
tried
let
to
me
cover up
do
Hunter
this.
Biden's involvement with
Excuse
Ukraine?
me. Let me do this, because I think it's valuable that the American people get a sense of what you've refused to answer today. So these are just some of the questions you refused to answer, or have answered with personal attacks on members of this committee. You were asked whether you consulted with career ethics lawyers, as you promised you would do during your nomination hearing, when you approved the president receiving a $400 million gift from the Qataris. You refused to answer that question. You were asked who or what role you may have played, or who played the role in asking that Trump's name be flagged in any of the Epstein documents gathered by the FBI. You refused to answer that question. You were asked whether Holman kept the $50,000 bribe money. You refused to answer that question. You were asked whether Holman paid taxes on the $50,000 bribe money. You refused to answer that question. You were asked, did career prosecutors find insufficient evidence to charge James Comey? You refused to answer that question. You were asked, how are military strikes on these boats in the Caribbean legal? And you refused to even answer that question.
Do you have a law degree,
excuse
Senator
me,
Schiff?
excuse me. You were asked, did you discuss indicting James Comey with the president? You refused to answer that question. You were asked, did you approve the firing of antitrust lawyers who disagreed with the Hewlett-Packard merger? You refused to answer that question. You were asked whether you support a restoration fund for violent insurrections to attack the Capitol on January 6th. You refused to answer that question. You were asked whether you were firing career professionals, career prosecutors, just because they worked on January 6th investigations. You refused to answer that question. You were asked by my California colleague whether you believe government officials, like immigration officials, have to abide by court orders. You wouldn't even answer that question. This is supposed to be an oversight hearing.
Oversight?
Excuse me, you can attack me after my time is over.
You've attacked all of us, including President Trump, for your entire career.
You can attack me later, and I know you've got plenty of canned attacks. We've heard them all day today.
Canned attacks on you?
This is supposed to be.
No one needs a canned attack on you.
Regular order, Madam Chair, I'm trying to speak. This is supposed to be an oversight hearing of the Justice Department. And it comes in the wake of an indictment called for by the president of one of his enemies. This is supposed to be an oversight hearing, and it comes in the wake of revelations that a top administration official took $50,000 in a bag, and this department made that investigation go away. This is supposed to be an oversight hearing when dozens of prosecutors have been fired simply because they worked on cases investigating the former president. This is, and now
What
the current
about the
president.
fires in California?
And
Do you
this
care
is
about that,
supposed to
Senator
be,
Schiff?
this is supposed to be an oversight hearing in which members of Congress can get serious answers to serious questions about the
Are the
cover-up-
riots in
about the
LA
cover-up-
serious?
About the cover-up of corruption, about the prosecution of the president's enemies. And
I think you owe the president an apology
when will it be
your entire career,
that the
frankly.
members of this committee on a bipartisan basis demand answers to those questions and refuse to accept
Clearly you're a failed lawyer
refuse to
because you don't
accept,
understand when
excuse
someone
me,
can and cannot
refuse
answer
to
a
accept
question.
personal slander as an answer to those questions.
Personal slander.
With
Will
that,
you
Madam Chair,
apologize to Donald
I yield
Trump
back.
for slandering him? Personal slander.
Senator
May I ask unanimous consent, Madam Chair, to introduce into the record the statement of 1,000 former Justice Department officials who warned that the Comey indictment is a democracy-threatening abuse of power. May I also request unanimous consent for the introduction to the record of 282 former career officials at the Justice Department raising an alarm who were voluntarily or involuntarily forced to leave the department because of improper actions taken by the Department of Justice. May I introduce with unanimous consent the Justice Department manual that talks about when initiating and declining charges are subject to impermissible considerations. And finally, Madam Chair, may I introduce the letter from Michael Ben-Ari, a career counterterrorism prosecutor, DOJ, a letter he nailed to his door, which concludes by urging officials to do the right thing for the right reasons, to follow the facts and the law, and raises the alarm that the decision to remove experienced career officials from U.S. attorneys' offices, the FBI, and critical parts of DOJ undermines our country's abilities to counter terrorist organizations, malign nation-state actors, and countless others that seek to harm our nation and its citizens. And he believes that the priority is prosecuting the president's
arguing, or are you admitting
rather
that?
than
Ms.
protecting the
Bondi,
country.
one moment.
May I have unanimous
Are you-
consent
Are
to
you
enter
entering
these
that
into the record?
Without objection.
Thank you. I yield back.
Senator Brett.
Senator Moody, may I clarify one thing he entered in the record? I just want to say that I believe he entered a letter by 200 and something former employees. Well, I believe the spokesperson for that letter was also the spokesperson for Jack Smith.
Senator Britt. Thank you, Madam Chair. General Bondi, I want to talk to you about the next generation. I want to talk to you about our kids, people who don't have a seat at the table but need us to fight for them tirelessly. When you look at this, I see a couple of different buckets of ways that bad actors are taking advantage of our children, and in some of the most extreme situations, we lose that child, whether to death or to self-harm, and I think we owe it to them to do something about it. So first is social media. Tell me, what are you doing? I have sat across from a number of parents who have talked to me about their child either falling victim to sextortion, different schemes that are online. We also know that there is an element of human trafficking that comes here. Let's start with social media. What are you doing to hold bad actors accountable, to track them down, and to keep our kids safe?
Senator, first, thank you for bringing that up. This, I believe, is what an oversight hearing should be about.
Thank you.
Not yell, oh, he's gone already. He comes in and leaves. This is what an oversight hearing should be about, trying to help parents and children online. Yes, Director Patel has been doing a great job. The FBI, we have an entire unit. Not only that, our National Security Division is working internationally.
Well, and I want to talk about that too, because I think a lot of this comes from overseas.
Yes.
And so whether it's these schemes, the sextortion schemes,
Yes.
et cetera, it's happening off our shores. How are you connecting the dots there? And then additionally, let's look at human trafficking. And you find a number of times people are lured into this from posts on social media. I believe that that is a global trafficking ring. I would like to speak to what are you doing to make sure that you're holding those people accountable and getting to the bottom of it, finding bad actors and making sure that we're keeping these children safe.
Senator Britt, we have made countless cases around this country, and many of them have involved global international defendants. In fact, we've been extraditing some of them back. As many as we can get, we're bringing them back to this country. That's how we're holding them accountable and locking them up for as long as we humanly can lock them up. And Director Patel, our National Security Division, have been working tirelessly on that. We have entire units working on that. I think the most
Do you feel
important-
like you've made better strides than we saw over the last 4 years?
We have made incredible strides. I'm sorry, I don't have the statistics in front of me, but yes, we have made, I'll
I would love
provide
to
those
get
to you.
those from you. I want to make sure that we are doing that. I also obviously have worked diligently alongside Senator Blackburn and so many others to put the proper guardrails in place when it comes to social media to prevent these things from happening to our children, allowing them to still thrive online, but knowing the threats that are out there, it is incumbent upon us to actually do something about it. So I hope that those different pieces of legislation that would help keep kids safe, help give you additional tools, I hope that this body and ultimately Congress will take those up.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah, sure.
That parents also, I always say your child has no right to privacy on the internet. And parents need to monitor what their kids are doing. Now, we all know that even elementary kids, school kids, so many of them have cell phones. Because they're at school, they're latchkey kids, they're riding the bus home. So many children have cell phones, but parents, you have to monitor. There are safeguards you can put on the phone, but you have to monitor
I also
what your
think
kids
that-
are doing on the internet
I
as
do
well.
think that there is some accountability that needs to be held even with social media providers.
Absolutely.
Because I know that, for instance, we had a judiciary subcommittee hearing where we heard from parent after parent whose child had, bought something online that they thought to be maybe a different type of drug. It was laced with fentanyl. They died. If that was happening on a storefront and a small business in America, we would shut that storefront down. We must do more to hold not only the bad actors online, but also the people who allow it to happen accountable. And I hope that you'll commit to work with me on that.
I wholeheartedly agree. Thank you,
So
Senator.
staying in that vein on parents, looking at illegal gaming across again, this is a global thing, offshore, illegal gaming. We have found that young men in particular have been targeted when it comes to betting and being involved in this legal gaming. We're finding that through whether it be advertisements or things that are directly targeted to get them addicted and get them pulled in and addicted on that. When it comes to illegal gaming, will you commit to me to taking a look at what is exactly happening offshore and also how they are utilizing different spaces to actually go after our children, getting them addicted and ultimately pulling them in?
Certainly, and I'm also sure the FBI would welcome working with you.
Wonderful. And then last but not least on that same vein, and you touched on it earlier when one of my colleagues asked you about this, but vaping. So if you're a parent and you're sitting here looking, Chinese vapes have, this is a real issue. You spoke a little bit about what you are worried will come next in this space. What are you doing to get to the bottom of that, and how are we going to make sure that these don't infiltrate our markets and ultimately don't end up in the hands of our children?
What we've been doing is we have been going around this country and we have been raiding these vape shops that are carrying these illegal drugs and shutting them down. And that's what Senator Kennedy and I were in Illinois doing. We were announcing that arrest. It was a massive arrest of illegal vapes from China, mainly coming in through China, laced with THC. Back to the, I was just saying, back to the child predators. Since January 20th, we have made 2,580 child exploitation cases, Senator Britt. That was the number I was trying to get my hands on.
Wow.
And that's 250 more than last year.
Will you commit to continuing to go after these unregulated products and particularly make sure that they are not in the hands of our children?
Yeah, and Senator Britt, we need to do that because it's targeting our children. Yes, absolutely.
Thank you very much. Today is obviously the second anniversary of the horrific attacks on October 7th. And this morning I had an opportunity to listen to stories of some individuals that had been held hostage, some of the families that will never get their loved ones back, and some that are hoping that there is a resolution soon and they once again get to embrace their family member that they have not seen in over 700 days. It was a reminder of, one of them said, you know, I can breathe, but I can't live until this is resolved. And we know in addition to this horror and nightmare that they have been living for the past 2 years, we have seen a rise in anti-Semitism here on our soil. When we said never again actually has to mean never again. And I know that you and I spoke about this briefly when you were in front of this committee, but can you talk to me about the work that DOJ is doing to combat that rise in anti-Semitism and to hold offenders of that, to hold them accountable?
And Senator Britt, thank you for again bringing up that today is the second anniversary of that horrific attack on Israel. Donald Trump is the greatest peace president of our lifetime, probably in our history. And if anyone can resolve this, it will be Donald Trump. I've also met with many of the families of the hostages and of those who have lost loved ones. We are combating anti-Semitism throughout this country, not only through my Civil Rights Division, and we haven't really talked about Harmeet Dillon a lot today, but Harmeet Dillon runs our Civil Rights Division, and she is working with Leo Terrell, and they are combating anti-Semitism around this country. We have an anti-Semitism task force that we're forming.
Do you mind getting me an update on the progress that task force has made, please?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. And last, in my last remaining minute, certainly appreciate the work that you're doing. I know my colleague, Senator Lee, already asked you about the attacks on ICE officers. Thank you for working to keep our federal agents safe, federal law enforcement safe. So thank you for the work that you're doing there. I do want to just talk a little bit about crime in American cities. We had a horrific event occur in Montgomery, Alabama over the weekend, and 14 people, 2 people are no longer with us and 12 people injured. My heart breaks for every one of the victims and their families and the community at large. I'd like to know a little bit about your interagency work and talk to me about things that you find, because we have to find solutions in this space. This cannot keep happening. And what are you seeing that is, your biggest success stories and your biggest challenges you have to working to try to resolve crime throughout the country?
Well, right now, the biggest challenge is that the federal government is shut down, but we're not letting that become a challenge because all of our agents are working tirelessly. And I get almost real-time updates from my agencies, Rob Sakata, who's the Deputy Director of ATF, Kash Patel and Dan Bongino at FBI, Terry Cole, at DEA, Gadi Serralta with our U.S. Marshals, and all of our great team of lawyers. And we are working nonstop to combat crime. That's Donald Trump's only directive to me, is to make America safe again. And that's what we're going to do in this country, Senator Britt.
Well, thank you for your commitment and any best practices you have or ways that you have found to tackle challenges that are effective. Please let us know. We certainly want to see every community across our state and our country safe, and we appreciate yours and President Trump's commitment to doing that.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Britt. And I will just say thank you to our witness who has been sitting here for now for 4.5 hours without a break. I think maybe a little bit under the weather. And you have outlasted pretty much everyone here but Senator Britt and myself. So thank you for being here today.
I'm in good company.
Well, certainly coming in behind someone as strong and as passionate and as committed to doing the right thing and to justice. When you served as Attorney General in Florida, that was certainly a high bar that you set, and I was honored to come in after you as the Attorney General. You've touched on so many of the issues that you fought for in Florida that you are still fighting for now here in Washington, and whether that is protecting our children, protecting our law enforcement officers, protecting the rule of law. All of these things, your experiences, both personal and professional, are playing into how you are standing strong for what this country was built on in this role. And I, for one, am proud not only to be here as a United States Senator, the most junior member of this committee, but to be here and working in Washington right now with the honor of serving as a senator and watching this administration and certainly you bring this country back to its bearing, that we are a nation that is a government for the people with the consent of the governed. And if we are going to protect life, liberty, and their opportunity to pursue happiness, we have to guarantee safety. It has to be a mission. And that starts in our communities and our states. And I think what people are missing is the federal government has a set of laws that it is working within federal jurisdiction, that it is incumbent upon them to execute and enforce within the states. And I'm watching what has happened around this nation as a result of what has happened under the Biden administration and what they allowed to happen purposefully, whether that was rogue prosecutors, defunding police, decriminalizing crime, allowing juveniles to run rampant with no accountability, revolving jailhouse door, no respect for the rule of law. It goes on and on and on. And you're seeing that now playing out in the cities around this country. And what is very terrifying, and I think you would agree, is this is not your Democratic Party of yesteryear, where we might have said they're soft on crime. This is now a Democratic Party who is offering support for and encouraging obstructionist behavior, threats of violence against law enforcement. And as the wife of a law enforcement officer, as someone who's committed my own life as a federal prosecutor, attorney general, now as a U.S. senator,
Judge.
it is and a judge, thank you. I think I had to demonstrate that a little bit earlier. It is horrifying to me that where we used to talk about differences in policies, where one party was thought to be tough on crime and one party was thought to be soft on crime, we're not talking about the fundamental ideals and structure on which this country was built. And I have been horrified watching the partnership between a governor in Illinois and a mayor in Chicago, and the collaboration, some might say the corruption, and the rhetoric they are using. And I have to say this because I think for somebody like you and somebody like me, it makes you extraordinarily concerned for the success and future of this country. Pritzker. He uses words like, this is an unconstitutional invasion of Illinois, militarized CBP and ICE agents to the street of Chicago to cause violence and chaos in the city. And I quote, Pritzker, people are getting detained, they're getting arrested, US citizens, making it a war zone. Pritzker, it's a war zone, and they are using tear gas and chemical agents at peaceful protesters. Pritzker, they are waging war on our people. Pritzker, we must now start calling this what it is, Trump's invasion. Not to be outdone, though, by Johnson, who says that, and I quote, law enforcement is a sickness. We have a rogue, reckless group of heavily armed mass individuals roaming throughout our city. Johnson, ice lies and people die. Johnson, the Trump administration must end the war on Chicago. Johnson, in the coming weeks, we will use this as an opportunity to build greater resistance. I am wondering if Pritzker and Johnson understand that there are federal laws that criminalize inciting violence against law enforcement and federal agents. I am wondering if they are concerned at all about what their speech is doing and the danger it's putting not only federal agents in, that, by the way, swore an oath to protect other people, but the danger it's putting the citizens of their community in. Anytime you start pitting your own people against their own government, a government is only there at its core to protect rights and the safety of its people, that is incredibly dangerous. And I hear this rhetoric, and I think to myself, every foreign adversary of the United States of America in this country is saying thank you to the governor of Illinois and the mayor of Chicago. Thank you for doing their jobs for them, for undermining the strength and safety of this country, and for gaslighting the American people as we are trying to shore up the stability of our communities. And that puts you in such a remarkable, important position right now. You are the top law enforcement official in this country. And you have a responsibility to call out this rhetoric. And when it violates and crosses over from free speech into inciting violence, we have to call that out. We have to remind the American people that we are dealing with the aftermath of millions of undocumented allowed to flood into this country. I know because I litigated it and I fought against it. And when I had to get through litigation documents that showed their plan was to step back and let the border be overrun, when nobody believed that was happening, it was people like us that said, this is happening. They're allowing our country to be overrun. They're allowing, through rogue prosecutors and an undermining and demoralization of law enforcement, for our cities to fall prey to criminals. They are allowing this to happen. And they are doing so, trust me, cheered on by our adversaries. And it takes someone with strength and the ability to take the criticism for 4 hours and 40 minutes and sit here resolute in your commitment to uphold the rule of law. And I know the only reason that you can do that is because what you went through in your prior life, working hand in hand with law enforcement, seeing what their families went through, holding the hands of victims, not letting these people turn our heroes into villains, and certainly not letting these people make the United States of America appear anything other than what it is. It is a country that protects, first and foremost, our people's rights, and we do so by also guaranteeing with the consent of our government that we'll focus on their safety. And that is why I was so glad you started out this hearing with my mission is to protect the people and prosecute violent crime, and to make sure the corruption that happened again under the last administration can never happen again. And as you sat here today and you heard the affect of the people whose friends and colleagues, and indeed even members of the judiciary, whose phones were analyzed and traced from grand jury subpoena, and they're just finding out last night, assuring them that you understand what that feels like and that you will not let it happen again, no matter how much they want to disguise accountability as weaponization. Thank you for being you, Pam the prosecutor, Pam the person that cares about this country and its people and the future of America. Thank you for being here today. Would you like to end with any comments?
Thank you, Senator Moody. And you know, they may try to destroy our country, but they won't. They won't be successful, nor will our foreign adversaries, because we have the greatest president in Donald Trump, and he will make America safe again, and he will keep us safe. Thank you, Senator, and thank you for all you do.
And we will keep the record open for a week. I know Senator Whitehouse wanted to offer some comments for the record and any other additional questions, and we'd ask that you respond to those.
I'm
in
sure he
writing.
did.
Thank you so much. And with that, the hearing is adjourned.
This is the second anniversary of Hamas invading the sovereign state of Israel. Yesterday, I had some Palestinian advocates talk to me about the number of people being killed. I like to remind them there wouldn't be one death if there hadn't been this invasion of the sovereign state of Israel by what happened 2 years ago today. Attorney General Bondi, since your confirmation, you've now had the opportunity to face the federal bureaucracy that you must reform to better serve the American people. As I said to Director Patel, your charter is no simple task. When you arrived, you were left with the Justice Department free fall. Senate Democrats have denied your leadership personnel. We haven't been able to confirm your Assistant Attorney General for Congressional Affairs. It's now been 7 months, all the while Democrats complain that they can't get answers from the Office of Leg Affairs. They have blocked the confirmation of that person. Since your confirmation, you've taken steps to institute needed reforms. Under your leadership, the Justice Department has cut funding to politicize programs to reinvest in core policing activities. Focusing on crime and getting tough on criminals is a welcome change from 4 years of Biden administration's soft on crime policies. During the Biden administration, the Justice Department failed to collect billions of dollars in criminal fines and penalties from corporate offenders. That's money should have been placed in the Crime Victims Fund, and much of the money of the past administration did collect went to the Justice Department's slush funds instead of aiding victims of criminals and violent activity. My Democratic colleagues have shared concerns about funding agency and law enforcement, but generally haven't supported funding programs. Under the Democrat leadership, the COPS reauthorization was held over in committee at least 8 times before the 118th Congress concluded. It never received a vote in this committee. More recently, Democrats have refused to support fundamental Justice Department programs like Protect Safe Neighborhoods. And last week, Democrats again blocked most of the Police Week bills from passing the Senate, even though they passed out of this committee unanimously. In contrast to these indefensible positions, the judiciary provisions in the Republican reconciliation bill made hundreds of millions of dollars available to the Justice Department to combat crime. Attorney General Bondi, you've also created task force to attack the problems left by your predecessor. You've created a team to review the overwhelming evidence of political weaponization by federal law enforcement, including the discredited Crossfire Hurricane investigations. Your weaponization working group has worked with my staff to bring forward resolutions for whistleblowers, and I commend you and your staff efforts to find solutions for these patriots. I understand the task force to eradicate anti-Christian bias has done an investigation in how the Biden administration weaponized the government against people of faith. I look forward to your next report on that subject. Now, you've also shuttered a certain task force that was a stain on this country, the Foreign Influence Task Force. Democrats have cried about closing this misleadingly named unit. The task force was involved in undermining my and Senator Johnson's Biden family investigation. Instead of rooting out foreign influence, the task force became a political weapon. And speaking of political weapons, I'm now going to address examples of political weaponization in the previous administration. Most recently, I and Senator Johnson made public information relating to Arctic Foss expansive targeting of Republicans. And on Monday, just yesterday, because of our investigative work, the FBI disclosed that the Biden administration used Arctic frost to target Republican senators, including several senators on this very committee. This is an outrage, an unconstitutional breach, and ought to be immediately addressed by you and Director Patel. It's also a clear example of why the Justice Department has had to fire personnel who you hear Democrats defending. While on the taxpayer's dime, these now fired employees not only weaponized law enforcement, but some of them also retaliated against patriotic whistleblowers. These are indefensible acts. Now I've obtained additional weaponization records thanks to brave whistleblowers that predate Arctic Frost. I've obtained documents created by then Supervisory Special Agent Tebow, dated March 2, 2017. The title of this document is quote unquote Trump, and it appears to relate to matters different than Crossfire Hurricane. This document discusses a rumor at FBI headquarters that the FBI's Washington field office was leaning towards opening a case on the Trump campaign. Tebow noted they weren't close to opening an investigation, but did say this, quote, "What are we doing? Aggressively seeking out open source information, human intelligence info that could predicate a case," end of quote. You see, less than 2 months into the Trump's first presidency, the partisan Comey FBI was very hard at work trying to manufacture another case against Trump. Tebow and the FBI eventually got their wish in April 2022 with the opening of Arctic Frost. This was a political fishing expedition to get Trump at all costs, just like Crossfire Hurricane. And of course, it's a disgrace to the taxpayers. Whistleblowers have provided me with another document. This document is a 2017 case, updated, also drafted by then Supervisor Special Agent Tebow. This is a case update for CR 15, the now disbanded and discredited Public Corruption Squad at FBI's Washington field office, which says, quote, McAuliffe case, Steve Sullivan, Chief Financial Officer of Teneo, was interviewed in New York City. Info provided seemed to confirm Teneo was used as a pass-through for Doug Band to pay former President of the United States, end of quote. Doug Band was deputy assistant to then President Clinton and continued to work for him in post-presidency. Therefore, it's pretty clear that the reference to the President of the United States is Bill Clinton. The document further notes additional interviews the FBI planned to conduct as part of the case. This information confirms there was an FBI case on McAuliffe, and it indicates the Clintons and their associates were relevant to it. Did the FBI throw its resources behind this matter just like it did against Trump and his associates? A legitimate question. Or did they sweep it under the rug? A legitimate question. So, General Bondi, I'd like to have you provide me with all the records relating to these matters for further verification. Lastly, whistleblowers have provided me additional records related to the Biden FBI political conduct against Peter Navarro. The first document is a request for physical surveillance on Navarro the day the FBI arrested him. The second document is a timeline of that surveillance. When Navarro, the FBI didn't arrest him at his house, which was literally right next to the FBI headquarters. Instead, they surveilled him and his fiancée all morning, starting at his home, following them to the airport, and then arrested him in public at the Reagan airport. The way Navarro was treated is unnecessary. General Bondi, I would like you to provide me all records relating to this matter. Attorney General Bondi, this Congress, I've made public one document after another, one whistleblower disclosure after another, one example of weaponization after another. So to our average constituent, this is all history, but it's all pointing out the wrong of government, using the power of government to go after people They're political people you don't like. We're pointing this all out because we can't have this repeated in the United States. We want an end to it right now, whether we have Republican or Democrat administrations. All evidence of your predecessors' total failures. It's time for accountability. And I look forward to hearing about your success in that regard. Senator Durbin.
Thanks, Chairman Grassley, for holding this oversight hearing. Welcome, Attorney General Bondi. I'm glad that we are following this committee's longstanding tradition of regular oversight hearings with the Attorney General, the Director of the FBI, and the Secretary of Homeland Security. These hearings have never been more important as President Trump turns the full force of the federal government on Chicago and other American cities. The assault on the city I am proud to represent is just one example of how President Trump and Attorney General Bondi shut down justice at the Department of Justice even before the president's party, controlling the White House, Senate, and House of Representatives, shut down the government. The Attorney General has systematically weaponized our nation's leading law enforcement agency to protect President Trump and his allies and attack his opponents and, sadly, the American people. You have purged hundreds of senior career officials since you first appeared before us. These men and women had dedicated their careers to protecting the American people. As a result, the department has lost literally thousands of years of law enforcement expertise. To be specific, you disbanded the FBI's Foreign Influence Task Force and the National Cryptocurrency Enforcement Team, despite the growing threat of foreign election interference and the drastic rise in cryptocurrency crimes. You forced out almost 75% of the Civil Rights Division's career attorneys, while hate crimes are on the rise. You fired more than 100 immigration judges, while the immigration case backlog is more than 3 million. You cut the public integrity section from 30 prosecutors to 2, while political corruption skyrockets. During your confirmation hearing, I asked you about your many potential conflicts of interest as a former lobbyist. You responded under oath, quote, "You will consult with career ethics officials within the department and make the appropriate decision," end of quote. But the Justice Department then removed those career ethics officials and put in their place inexperienced political appointees beholden to President and you. And you've effectively shut down the Office of Professional Responsibility, which investigates misconduct by Department of Justice attorneys. Now, with these ethical guardrails out of the way, corruption has run rampant at the Department of Justice. Although you've been a registered foreign agent for Qatar, you did not recuse yourself from signing off on President Trump's solicitation of a free jet from the royal family, even though this gift was clearly illegal. Connections to Attorney General Bondi seem to yield more favorable outcomes for defendants. At least 2 long-running federal prosecutions were abruptly dropped after the defendants hired your brother. It's no surprise that Ed Martin, the failed U.S. attorney nominee you appointed as senior official, said, quote, "No MAGA left behind." Our nation's top law enforcement agency has become a shield for the president and his political allies when they engage in misconduct. Last year, President Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, was allegedly recorded accepting a $50,000 bag of cash in exchange for promising immigration enforcement-related contracts. Under your leadership, the investigation into Mr. Homan was dropped. After President Trump pardoned nearly 1,600 January 6 insurrectionists, including more than 600 charged with assaulting or impeding law enforcement, the Department of Justice is arguing in court that these pardons provide immunity for wholly unrelated crimes in multiple cases. Jared Weiss was filmed on January 6th, encouraging his fellow rioters to attack the Metropolitan Police Department officers. And he said, "F them, kill them." What happened to Mr. Weiss? He's been hired by you as a senior advisor. In February, you said the Epstein client list was, quote, "sitting on my desk right now for review." 8 months later, you still haven't produced these files, and a credible whistleblower told my office that FBI agents were directed to flag any records in which President Trump was mentioned. The Department of Justice ordered the dismissal of corruption charges against the former New York City Mayor Eric Adams in a corrupt backroom deal to secure his cooperation with the president's immigration agenda. Acting U.S. Attorney Daniel Sassoon, a Republican appointed by President Trump, resigned in protest. Acting U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, Eric Siebert, a Republican appointed by President Trump, was forced to resign because he didn't believe there was sufficient evidence to indict New York Attorney General Letitia Adams or former FBI Director James Comey. In his place, President Trump installed his former personal attorney, someone with no prosecutorial experience, to indict Director Comey, which she did. She joins a network of unqualified MAGA loyalists masquerading as federal prosecutors, like Alina Habba, who said she would use her position to, quote, turn New Jersey red, close quote, and Sigil Chattah, who once said that a black political opponent was, quote, should be hanging from an effing crane, end of quote. The President and Attorney General attempted to bypass the Senate to install these unqualified extremists. Where do you find these people? Courts have ruled that both Ms. Habba and Ms. Chattah are serving in their roles illegally, jeopardizing countless prosecutions by your office. Why? And that's just one example of how the Department of Justice is making America less safe. Attorney General Bondi shut down the Organized Crime and Drug Enforcement Task Force, OSADEF, which has dismantled thousands of criminal organizations. And you diverted thousands of FBI, DEA, and ATF agents and DOJ prosecutors from their critical missions to carry out the president's mass deportation agenda. Attorney General Bondi, not surprisingly, federal drug prosecutions have dropped to the lowest level in decades. Let me repeat that. Federal prosecutions for drug crimes have dropped to the lowest level in decades on your watch. Department of Justice has also unilaterally terminated 373 grants that provide critical funding to state and local law enforcement to the tune of $500 million. The 2026 Trump budget would slash the high-intensity drug trafficking areas program known as HIDA by more than a third, from $300 million to $196 million. Instead of taking common sense steps that have proven to help reduce crime, Attorney General, you're focusing on helping President Trump play strongman on television. He has illegally deployed troops to Chicago and other American citizens and has threatened to send more. The Justice Department defends this dubious legal basis for these deployments and diverts DOJ personnel and their components to assist in these efforts. These deployments basically target Democratic-run cities and Democratic leaders, ignoring many Republican-led areas of our country with even higher crime rates, and making clear that this is for political theater, not public safety. One particular chaotic raid in Chicago Tuesday last week, aided by the FBI and ATF, which you supervise. In the middle of the night, federal agents pulled women and children out of their beds, crashed down the doors to their homes, destroyed their apartments, zip-tied children and others, and detained immigrants and U.S. citizens alike for hours in vans. When one witness complained about the treatment of the small children, an agent laughed at her and said, "F them kids." On Friday, a federal judge appointed by President Trump held that deploying the National Guard in Portland is illegal. White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller accused her of, quote, legal insurrection, close quote. At a time of rising threats to federal judges, this kind of language is inexcusable. Last week, the President and Secretary Hegseth summoned senior military officials to a political pep rally at Quantico, where the President said he wanted to use American cities as, quote, training grounds for our military. Training grounds for our military. To fight the, quote, enemy within. Chicago is not the enemy. Our fellow Americans are not the enemy. It is abhorrent for the President, who is supposed to represent all Americans regardless of political party, to describe anyone who disagrees with him in this manner. To my Republican colleagues who claim the previous administration weaponized the Department of Justice, President Biden retained President Trump's FBI Director Christopher Wray, who President Trump then fired. President Biden never directed the Attorney General to prosecute his political opponents. President Biden never fired his own political appointees for refusing to prosecute his targets. What has taken place since January 20th, 2025 would make even President Nixon recoil. This is your legacy, Attorney General Bondi. In 8 short months, you have fundamentally transformed the Justice Department and left an enormous stain in American history. It will take decades to recover. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Would you please rise so I can give you swear? Do you affirm the testimony you're about to give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Please be seated and give us your opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Grassley and Ranking Member Durbin, and every member of this committee. I'm grateful for the opportunity to testify in front of you today. First, please join me in remembering, as you said, Chairman Grassley, all the Jewish people who lost their lives in the October 7th attacks 2 years ago today. Also, please let's pray for all the hostages and the families of all of those individuals. They are a critical reminder of our central mission here at the Department of Justice, protecting the safety and security of the American people. That is why, even when the government is otherwise shut down because of the Democrats, the department's law enforcement officers and prosecutors are hard at work fighting, protecting you from the threats, foreign and domestic. When I was confirmed as the 87th Attorney General of the United States, I took office with 2 main goals: to end the weaponization of justice and return the department to its core mission of fighting violent crime. As to ending the weaponization of justice, we learned that former FBI secretly investigated you and your colleagues. Why? They wanted to take President Trump off the playing field. They were playing politics with law enforcement powers and will go down as a historic betrayal of public trust. This is the kind of conduct that shatters the American people's faith in our law enforcement system. We will work to earn that back every single day. We are returning to our core mission of fighting real crime. While there is more work to do, I believe in 8 short months, we have made tremendous progress towards those ends. Our federal surges in Washington, D.C. and Memphis are a perfect example of how the Department of Justice should operate. We created strong partnerships with local leadership, working hand in hand with both cities to send resources where they were needed most. The results speak for themselves. We have made more than 3,800 arrests here in Washington while seizing more than 365 illegal guns. In Memphis, we have already made more than 300 arrests and close to 80 illegal guns in just a week. We are replicating that tough on crime approach throughout this country. Under the leadership of Director Kash Patel, the FBI is doing outstanding investigative work to keep American people safe. The FBI just conducted a months-long operation called Summer Heat, which resulted in over 8,600 arrests from June to September. More than 6,500 arrests fell under the FBI's violent crime and gang program. Under the leadership of Administrator Terry Cole, the DEA has seized 47.9 million fentanyl pills and 4,500 kilos of fentanyl powder. That represents 370 million deadly doses, 370 million. The DEA is dismantling violent cartel drug trafficking networks across this country, including the seizure of nearly 470 million in criminal assets. Under the leadership of Gadi Seralta, our U.S. Marshals have been the tip of the spear on federal surges and protecting judges and elected officials. Our Marshals have arrested more than 51,000 fugitives nationwide since January 20th. Under the leadership of Acting Director Dan Driscoll, ATF has taken more than 23,000 illegal guns off our streets. 3,400 of those guns have been linked to trafficking between the U.S. and Mexico. My attorneys have done incredible work advancing President Trump's agenda and protecting the executive branch from judicial overreach. We've been sued more than 400 times since January 20th. Judges have issued more than 90 temporary restraining orders against us, more than the previous several administrations combined. Despite the unprecedented degree of activism we've seen from the lower courts, we have never ignored a court order. And why would we? We have secured a historic 22 victories at the Supreme Court alone, with more to come. Our civil rights attorneys are fighting discrimination and anti-Semitism. Our criminal attorneys are prosecuting violent criminals and foreign terrorists every single day. I look forward to continuing this work at the Department of Justice, and I look forward to testifying before you today. Thank you, Chairman.
I forgot to turn on the microphone. Let me start over again. We have 10-minute rounds. I've asked Senator Blackburn to chair between 10:30 and 11. I hope that we can have good decorum during this hearing. Treat each other with respect. General Bondi, just in case you get cut off with something that you don't get to answer your question when that senator's done, if you ask me for a little bit of time, not a lot of time, but a little bit of time to finish your answer, I'd be glad to give that to you. So starting myself, you inherited a bloated bureaucracy. It requires reorientation to better serve your mission of the department. That would include reassessing grants disguised to help Americans, but many were partisan pet projects. It also requires reallocation of resources to better serve the American people. On this issue, I've got two questions. What updates can you share with the committee about your review and grant DOJ and grants that DOJ has reassessed? Just give us some examples, don't I know?
Sure. Thank you, Chairman. During my appearance at the department's budget hearings, I acknowledged that some grants were mistakenly terminated, and we have made a process to correct that. All grant termination appeals will be individually considered for alignment with our current policies, which are strengthening law enforcement and protecting victims. Recipients are given the opportunity to appeal a grant termination consistent with the rules by writing to the Assistant Attorney General. Of the 5,800 discretionary grants that were reviewed, only 376, approximately 7%, were terminated. So far, OJP has turned back on 18 awards, 17 appeals have been denied, and the rest are actively being reviewed, with decisions expected soon.
My colleagues on the other side claim that your department has reallocated resources to immigration enforcement, and it's had a negative impact on law enforcement. We know that drugs and crimes are very much a part of immigration enforcement, so these attacks are clearly off the mark. Explain your view of these misguided assertions.
Chairman, every day our FBI, DEA, ATF, and now U.S. Marshals working on a task force with Homeland Security are out there keeping Americans safe and getting illegal aliens out of our country, many of whom have committed violent crimes in this country. Our agents will continue to fight violent crime in this country, working hand in hand. One example is right here in Washington, D.C. We have the D.C. task force that has been incredibly successful We are so proud of the work that that has done. We have been working hand in hand with the local officials here in DC, and we are very proud of that work. And we're taking that to Tennessee and around this country to keep Americans safe.
I won't repeat the things I've said about Arctic frost, but we had this recent revelation yesterday of my Republican senators being targeted by the government, underscoring the point about Arctic frost. When taken in context with widespread government weaponization against Trump and conservatives in the last decade, the conduct's arguably is worse than Watergate. So I got two questions along this line. How many Department of Justice and FBI personnel have been held accountable for their partisan and constitutional questionable conduct, and what was their punishment? If you could give a few examples or follow up in writing, since there's so many people that fall into this category.
Yes, Senator. Yes, Chairman, we will.
So you want to answer that in writing? Yeah, okay.
Yes, the exact number I can answer in writing. Yes.
Okay. Was Attorney General, on the same subject, was Attorney General Garland, Director Wray, and/or President Biden's White House aware of the FBI targeting Republican senators? Did they approve it? Now, let's be clear, either they knew and allowed it to happen, or they didn't know, and if they didn't know, it points to a lack of oversight of Jack Smith's runaway case.
Chairman Grassley, that's what we've been talking about when we refer to the weaponization of government. Operation Arctic Frost was an unconstitutional, undemocratic abuse of power. During Arctic Frost, the FBI also placed 92 linked Republican individuals and Republican groups, such as Charlie Kirk's Turning Point, on their list. This is the kind of conduct that shattered the American people's faith in our government, as I said in my opening statement. We are ending this weaponization. Our FBI is targeting violent criminals, child predators, and other lawbreakers, not sitting senators who happen to be from the wrong political party. Several of your colleagues sitting at this dais were targeted, and others. We will continue to stop that throughout the Justice Department. That is the ultimate weaponization of government.
Have you sought grand jury secrecy waivers so that all of Arctic Frost documents can be produced to Congress? And if not, do you plan to do that?
Chairman Grassley, I will be working directly with Director Patel on this issue, and there's not much more we can say about the issue for obvious reasons at this time.
Okay. Public Safety Officers Benefit Program, PSOB, provides benefits to law enforcement and first responders if they're disabled or killed in the line of duty. Affected family members may also benefit. My Oversight and a Government Accountability Office report shows that some claims have taken thousands of days to conclude. PSOB applicants have also informed my office that they've been left in tears with disrespectful ways they've been treated by the government. Question number 1 and 2 in this area, but I'll start just with 1. What actions have been taken to hold DOJ officials accountable for their failures to manage the program and treat applicants with respect?
Chairman Grassley, as stated earlier, there have been many terminations from the Department of Justice, and we stand by all of those. Many of those are subject to active litigation. This Department of Justice will treat everyone with respect, and we will do everything in our power to help citizens of this country. Please reach out to us with any individual cases, and I will personally look at them for you, Chairman.
Okay. So if you'll provide that information, that was my second question. So now let's go on to regarding the initial FBI 1023 document that I made public last Congress. That document mentioned 1, text messages, 2, audio recordings, and 3, financial records that allegedly approved a bribery scheme with the Biden family and foreign interest. I asked Director Patel if his predecessors made any effort to determine whether these records existed. He answered no. What steps has the department taken to determine whether these records exist? One way or another, this matter ought to be put to rest.
Chairman Grassley, I know Director Patel is working hard on this with the members of the FBI.
Okay. So we don't know if these records exist, or you just can't say that publicly at this point?
I don't want to discuss any of that publicly,
Okay.
Director.
The Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act includes a safeguard to prevent political weaponization. The reauthorization mandated certain members and their staffs shall be entitled to attend any proceedings of the FISA court. Former Biden DOJ Assistant Attorney General Matt Olson drafted a privacy agreement that allowed the department to hide information from Congress during FISA proceedings. Matt Olson made a career out of targeting President Trump and his allies, so it's not surprising that he would attempt to hinder congressional oversight or cover up for the Biden regime. I want to make sure that you get rid of the ridiculous and misguided Olson memo. When can you tell me that will be done?
We will notify you, Chairman Grassley. Thank you.
Okay, Senator Durbin.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Madam Attorney General, let me ask you this question. Were you consulted by the White House before they deployed National Guard troops to cities in the United States?
I am not going to discuss any internal conversations with the White House.
You won't even say whether you talked to the White House about this?
I am not going to discuss any internal conversations with the White House with you, Ranking Member.
I noticed that. What's the secret? Why do you want to keep this secret? The American people don't know the rationale behind the deployment of National Guard troops in my state. The word is, and I think it's been confirmed by the White House, they are going to transfer Texas National Guard units to the state of Illinois. What's the rationale for that?
Yeah, Chairman, as you shut down the government, you voted to shut down the government, and you're sitting here, our law enforcement officers aren't being paid. They're out there working to protect you. I wish you loved Chicago as much as you hate President Trump. And currently, the National Guard are on the way to Chicago. If you're not going to protect your citizens, President Trump will.
Been on this committee for more than 20 years. That's the kind of testimony you expect from this administration. A simple question as to whether or not they had a legal rationale for deploying National Guard troops becomes grounds for a personal attack. I think it's a legitimate question. It's my responsibility. She refuses to answer as to whether she had any conversation with the White House about deploying national troops to my state. That's an indication, I'm afraid, where we are politically in this place. Let me ask you another question. I want to, if you will, hold on a second. Make sure I got the right page of facts here. You testified under oath when you last before this committee that before your appointment to Attorney General, you had served as a representative of some sort for the royal family of Qatar. There was an issue that came before you in May when President Trump accepted a $400 million luxury jet from the royal family of Qatar for temporary use as Air Force One before it's permanently gifted to the Trump Presidential Library Foundation. The Constitution unequivocally bestows on Congress the power to control whether any officer of the United States, including the President, may accept a gift, quote, from any king, prince, or foreign state, end of quote. And this gift clearly violates the statutory regime enacted by Congress. You've refused to answer a letter I sent to you 5 months ago asking the legal rationale you relied on to advise President Trump to accept this unprecedented gift from your former legal client. Can you make a promise today that you will disclose that?
Disclose what, Ranking Member?
I assume there was a letter or some sort of statement from your office to the White House to advise them that you felt it was permissible?
First, to address my role with Qatar, as I addressed with you during my confirmation hearing, I disclosed it in my SJQ. In private practice, I worked for Qatar for anti-human trafficking for the World Cup. That was my only involvement, and I made that very clear, and I'm very proud of everything I've done with anti-human trafficking. Obviously, in preparing any advice for the president on a jet or anything else, we consult with the Office of Legal Counsel. The confidentiality applies to their input as well. And Chairman, if you would approve and vote to approve, as Chairman Grassley said, excuse me, Ranking Member, as Chairman Grassley said, my employees, we would answer your letters a lot faster, yet you're stalling them at every stop. And to go back to your previous question, your city has a murder rate 5 times higher than New York's. 571 homicides last year. If you were serious about protecting your people, you would be asking this administration for help. You're saying that we're coming into your state and your city. We're there to help make America safe and Illinois safe, whether or not you want to.
I believe cutting federal grant programs to law enforcement in my state and across the nation does not make us any safer, and you've done just that. You've supplanted that decision by sending in National Guard troops to California and other places. That is a situation where the governors have not asked for that help. If you truly wanted to do this on a bipartisan basis, you wouldn't defy a governor, you would work with them. I'm prepared to do that. I'm prepared to work with this administration. But cutting these grants to law enforcement does not make us any stronger as a nation or give us the tools we need to reduce crime in Chicago. Now, I'd just like to ask you, when it came to this Qatar situation, did you consult with the ethics office in the Department of Justice before making your decision on this gift of a jet?
Chairman, I didn't gift a jet to anyone. My Office of Legal Counsel provides confidential advice to the president, to the White House, period. And you're conflating two issues. Cutting grants, I was very clear about what grants we've cut and what grants we haven't, only 7%. And if you have a grant in Illinois that you think that I've cut that is not that is protecting law enforcement officers or your people, you personally call me and I will work with you to turn that grant back on. I think many of the Democrats here can tell you, I have worked with them to turn grants back on. There's an appeal process. Tell me a specific grant that I have turned off in Illinois that would help law enforcement, and I will work with you. But you have not done that.
Did you
And
take
again,
a look?
the National Guard is on the way right now as we speak. Oh, by the way, so is Director Patel and Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche. You're sitting here grilling me, and they're on their way to Chicago to keep your state safe.
Madam Attorney General, it's my job to grill you. Investigation of your agency is part of my responsibility and this committee. You may not like the experience, but others have weathered the storm and answered questions in a respectful manner.
Can you tell me the grants,
Yes.
Ranking Member, please?
Take a look at the president's budget on HIDA grants. What happens to it in his proposed budget?
I'd be glad to meet with you on the
It's
grants.
cut by 1/3 from $300 million to 196. That's one example of a grant that works, and your administration has suggested cutting it in the budget lies ahead. I want to ask you about items in a letter I sent you in July that you have not answered. In February, you made a public claim that the Epstein client list was, quote, sitting on my desk right now for review, end of quote. You then produced already public information and no client list at a major media event hosted at the White House. Attorney General Bondi, why did you publicly claim to have the Epstein client list waiting for your review and then produce nothing relevant to that claim?
Senator Durbin, if you listen to my entire clip on that, I said I had not reviewed it yet, that it was sitting on my desk along with the JFK files, the Martin Luther King files, and I said I had not yet reviewed it. And if you see our memo on Epstein, you will see, excuse me, our memo on Epstein clearly points out that there was no client list, our July 6th memo. You also didn't let me respond to the HIDA question. The budget transfers $196 million for high-intensity drug trafficking areas to the Office of Justice Programs, OJP. The Justice Department will continue to administer those grants under OJP in 2026.
Going back to the Epstein files, according to another whistleblower who made a protected disclosure to my office, you pushed the FBI to review approximately 100,000 Epstein-related records on an arbitrarily short deadline in March, and the FBI was directed to flag any documents that mentioned President Trump. Nothing came of that review until July, when DOJ and FBI released an unsigned memo stating, quote, "There's no incriminating client list." Why was the July 7th memo unsigned?
The July 7th memo came from the FBI and the Department of Justice. Director Patel answered those questions very clear. And, you know, Senator Durbin, I find it very interesting that you refused repeated Republican requests to release the Epstein flight logs in 2023 and 2024. You fought that. Did you take money from Reid Hoffman, campaign donations, who was a huge Epstein friend? Why did you fight for years? Why did you fight to not disclose the flight logs, Senator Durbin?
I can tell you I did not refuse. One of the senators here wished to produce those logs, and I asked her to put it in writing, and she never did.
Yeah, I think Senator Blackburn would quarrel with you on that.
Well, I will quarrel with you as to Reid, somebody that you mentioned I never heard of.
Reid Hoffman.
So who gave the order to flag records related to President Trump?
To flag records for President Trump?
To flag any records which included his name.
I'm not going to discuss anything about that with you, Senator.
Eventually, you're going to have to answer for your conduct in this. And you won't do it today, but eventually you will. I yield, Mr. Chairman.
I got to
Mr.
interject
Chairman?
something here.
Mr.
before I
Chairman.
get to Pam.
Mr. Chairman, since Senator Durbin referred to me, I would really appreciate the opportunity to correct the record.
Proceed.
Because Senator Durbin knows I repeatedly asked for those flight logs. I brought up the subpoena. You even shut down the committee because you didn't want that, and you know I submitted that in writing, and you continue to misrepresent that, and I am not going to let that record stand.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman,
go ahead, Senator Durbin.
I just want to make it clear that the reason the committee business ended was that your side invoked the 2-hour rule. Point number 2 is I asked you if you wanted any documents like flight logs to put it in writing. You never did.
Yes, sir, I did, and your staff knows that I did.
No,
We'll submit, once again,
Send me a copy of
the
that, please.
information to you. We've done that several times, but we'll be happy to, once again, send it to you. I think your staff doesn't show that to you.
Well, as I started to say about the emolument clause, and Democrats bringing that up in regard to Qatar, back in March of 2016, they didn't care anything about my bringing up the emolument clause in regard. I wrote to the Obama Justice Department. That letter was based on Secretary Clinton's 2009 to 2013 financial disclosures when she was Secretary of State. Those disclosures showed that her husband participated in at least 62 events with foreign states. Some of those were speaking events with connections to foreign governments, and some speaking events were financially supported by foreign governments. 2 examples, Bill Clinton received